Let us pray. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, who hath made heaven and earth. We ask your blessing upon our nation. Bless the work of the members of this chamber as they represent their constituents. Bless those who assist their work. May they work diligently to bring about solutions to the pressing issues facing our people. Bless all men and women across our country, as well as Barbadians living overseas. Give to us all a vivid sense of your presence, so in moments of prayer, we may humbly lay before you our limitations and seek your purpose for the human race. So, Lord God, what we know not, teach us. What we have not, give us. And what we are not, make us, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Meeting 40 minutes held on Friday, March 5th, 2021 to be confirmed. Please turn on your mic, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that minutes of the meeting of Friday, March 5th be confirmed.
I beg to second that, sir.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are confirmed. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the minutes just referred to be deferred.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor, Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General, petitions, papers.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
commanded to lay the loan contract number BAO 004 between the Government of Barbados and the Inter-American Development Bank. It's a contingent loan for natural disaster emergencies.
Government notices, private members notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of this sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day sitting.
Government business.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 2. In the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the House, to move the second reading of the Appropriation Bill 2021.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into standing finance.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that the Speaker, Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Point of privilege, I imagine, Mr. Speaker, it would be useful, I think, if those of us on this side might be given some idea as to how we plan to proceed for the debate on this bill in terms of use of time over the next few days or a few weeks.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, before we go into committee, I'm not sure what query, what the specifics of the Leader of the Opposition's query. We've had numerous estimates. I don't know that today is any different other than the fact that because of the physical distancing protocols, we are arranging for the minister and staff members who are going to be in the proverbial well to join us from the committee room. There was a resolution to that effect on the last occasion. We're going into the head of small business, and I don't know what else to tell the honourable member other than let us get going.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for St. Joseph has this growing tendency to scoff at everything, but I'm quite serious. And I have a suspicion that even members on that side perhaps feel a little bit not apprised of how we're going to be proceeding over the next several days. Are we meeting every day this week? Are we meeting at the same time, 10 o'clock every day this week? Are we expecting that this debate will run into next week? It's common courtesy. It's absolute information.
Mr. Speaker, before I move that we resolve ourselves into committee, the honourable member has sat there smugly when he could just have easily walked across and asked a question. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now resolve itself into committee, into Standing Finance Committee. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded before.
That is the motion, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I would want to reaffirm my position of privilege. I think I have a right to know how we are going to be proceeding about this debate. You don't have to tell me which head you're going to be discussing if you don't choose to, but tell me exactly the time parameters within which we will be operating. Are we going for the entire week?
No, but there's a. Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I do believe it is something that can be cordially worked out between your side and the government side. Let me speak, please. Honourable, let me finish, please. I believe it is that is something that can be worked out between mature people in this lower chamber. I believe that it is all for good governance, that go across, let us reach across the aisle, the proverbial saying, and it's a matter that can be sorted. I do not think that this is a matter that is contentious, that would cause any problems between opposition and government in relation to a debate on the estimates. I do believe that there's a standard procedure, and if there's any deviation from that standard procedure, then that is only commonplace that in respect of each person that you reach across the island, and it's something that can be done. I do not believe it's something that should reach a stage where there's loggerheads in something of national debate like this. That's all I'm saying.
And Mr. Speaker, I agree with you entirely. And I very innocently and cordially ask for a bit of information that will be useful to us in terms of how we prepare for this debate and how we prepare and schedule our time. And I repeat, I have a suspicion that there are those on the other side who are in a similar position as to where I am and would like to know as well. I do not know what is making this a contentious issue. I simply ask a question. If you know the answer, give the answer, rather than talk about me sitting here smugly and I have to come and ask.
Where's the motion? Right. Honourable Leader of Government, please repeat the motion, please.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this House resolve itself into standing Finance Committee.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that this House do resolve itself into standing Finance Committee for further debate. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in standing Finance Committee.
Madam Chair, Head 92, Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, in the amount of $36,836.
Honourable,
$6,836.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Chair, and a matter of privilege, I'm asking your indulgence, if I may be so presumptuous, as to ask of yourself if you have the knowledge as to how we're likely to proceed with this debate over the course of the next several days and probably into next year.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I can go so far as tell you the order of which we'll be presenting this week. the opposition, I could only repeat what the honourable honourable leader of the House would have said. The Speaker, with respect to what the leader of the House would have said, that this matter could be dealt with at another time. And
But
this is a subordinate committee, and I do not have the right to answer you.
But ma'am,
Yes,
you're the presiding officer in the context of this committee. And if you are not aware of what the answer is, then it stands to reason that I am put in a serious case. I would like to know how we plan to proceed about the debate. If the presiding officer can't tell me that, well, then who can? If the leader of the government business of the day has it within his knowledge as to how we plan to proceed, he can simply say, it is a simple matter. I do not know if we're meeting for the whole day today. I do know when we're likely to meet tomorrow for the whole day, part day. Are we meeting on Thursday? Do we go into next week? Common courtesy.
Honourable Leader of Government Business, is there something written that we have the times allotted for this week at least, and the order in which the heads would have come?
That is being
we could pass this
resolved
part?
as we speak.
Thank you. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Chair, I'm
Yes,
asking
sir.
what order of heads, you know. Common courtesy would suggest they should share that information with me when they have it. I'm surprised that at this stage they would not have it. But when they have it, common courtesy would suggest they should share that with me. But that's not my point. My point is, how do we plan to proceed in terms of use of time over the next several days? Are we going into next week? Are we skipping days this week? Are we meeting for the entire day?
Madam Deputy Chair,
Yes, Honourable Leader of
I
Government
am
Business.
reliably informed that the leader of government business communicated with the leader of the opposition to tell him what heads were going to be debated today. Now, I don't know if the leader of the opposition wants us to tell him what time we're going to break for lunch, what time we're going to come back for lunch. He knows the first head that is being done. He knows the second head that is being done. He also knows that under the standing orders, there's a maximum amount of time which can be allocated to Standing Committee of Finance. I'm not even going to reflect on the fact that he would even deign to cross-examine the chairman of committees as to whether the chairman of committees knew or did not know. I don't know where that come from. I've never heard of a member cross-examining a presiding officer yet. If we can get on with the head, man.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Chair, never attempted to cross-examine you. I'm not a lawyer, don't cross-examine people. I leave that for other persons in here so to do. And I have not asked anything about the order of heads. It is in their purview, whether they want to share that with me or not. Common courtesy would suggest that they do. Let me correct the honourable member for St. Joseph. I have neither seen, heard, or heard from the substantive leader of government business in this house for maybe 3 weeks. I have not seen or heard the honourable member. If she has communicated to me, I am not aware of it. I do have an indication through the clerk, and I thank him for his courtesy, that perhaps today we will be looking at energy and small business and labor. One for 3 hours, one for an hour and a half. What happens after those 4.5 hours? What happens tomorrow? Are we debating full day tomorrow, half day, hour and a half, 3 hours? Madam Chair, are we going into next week? Are we going to the week after next? These are simple, common queries that I'm asking to have information so that I can prepare myself to be present here and to engage in debate. I don't have the luxury, as the 29 people on the other side have, ma'am, of coming here when they choose. I have to be here all the time. And I need to know what those times are.
best interest at this point to start the head. Hopefully at the end of this head, we'll be able to apprise you of the order and the timing and the days that we will proceed.
Well,
Honourable
I
Leader
thank you.
Opposition.
I thank you for that, Madam Chair. And may I say to you, in the interest of full disclosure, bearing in mind what the Honourable Attorney General just said, with reference to communication from the substantive leader of the House to myself, I checked my WhatsApp for any recent communication, and there's one that came in at 10 o'clock today. Hi, Joe. We start with the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, followed by the Ministry of International Business and Industry this afternoon. That is fine, and I appreciate this courtesy, even if it came at 10 o'clock. Not a problem. What I'm asking about is the use of time and not the order of heads.
I understand. Let us proceed, however, with the Standing Finance Committee. Yeah, with head 92.
Head 92, Madam Chair, and if I may repeat, in the amount of $34,036,836.
We invite the Honourable Minister for the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneur to enter the House.
Good morning,
House
Madam
virtually.
Chair. Even from this remote location, it is fairly clear that we have gotten off to a somewhat rocky and foreboding start. So in an effort to allow tempers to cool and reason to resume its seat, I will have a little bit longer.
Privilege, Madam Chair. I can't hardly hear what the Honourable Member is saying. I think we need to do something about the volume.
Okay, I agree. Let's see what we can do. Somebody if I can't hear you, though.
Try again. Can you hear me now, Madam Chair?
That's better, yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I was saying that it was clear even from this remote location that we had gotten off to an unanticipated, rocky, and foreboding start. And therefore, in an effort to allow tempers to cool and reason to resume its seat, ma'am, I would attempt to have a little bit lengthier introduction than perhaps I ordinarily would have. The Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, ma'am, was established in July of the year 2020, that is 7 months ago. And it would mark the first time, ma'am, that in the history of this country that there has been a policy and departmental linkage between medium, small enterprises and micro enterprises and the energy sector. And if you assess that construct of the departments, ma'am, and look at the policy architecture involved, it is clear that the well-being of micro, small, and medium enterprises is at the core of the ministry's business, and also the issue of augmenting the capacity of the MSME sector to reach and maintain export levels wherever that is practical and possible. Now, ma'am, it is obvious that we meet, today is the first day that the country substantially opens after over a month of pause. And we have to confront the inescapable reality that we meet under the shadow of COVID-19. And what has that caused, ma'am? It has caused for Barbados a veritable implosion in the private economy of this country. You will come to learn during the course of these estimates, ma'am, that economic activity, the real GDP of this country has declined by $1.5 billion during the course of the last financial year. And therefore, these estimates are tailored in large measure, ma'am, towards a program of recovery. And that recovery has to be in the context of sustaining business. It has to be in the context of the well-being of households, especially financial well-being, and the creation, ma'am, wherever possible, of economic activity. And that specific latter issue of generating and creating economic activity is perhaps more important now than ever before, certainly since our independence in 1966. To achieve this, ma'am, there are a number of strategic goals drawn between the Division of Commerce and Small Business and Entrepreneurship on one hand, and the Division of Energy and Natural Resources on the other. Clearly, ma'am, as a point of departure, what we have to do is to try our best to facilitate and promote the capture of medium, small, micro enterprises, and to get an understanding, and this is very important as far as I'm concerned, an understanding of their economic impact. It is true to say, ma'am, that the most recent study that I am aware of with regard to the state of the small business sector in Barbados was commissioned by the Small Business Association in 2016 and done by the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies. That study, ma'am, 2016, reflects that 92% of the formal enterprises in Barbados are micro, small, and medium enterprises, and that collectively they employed at that time 46,000 people. Perhaps more interesting, ma'am, is the fact that 42% of those enterprises see an annual sales, and that's the receipts of their business, being less than $100,000. Now that tells me, ma'am, as the minister, a few very important things. First of all, the issue of the date of the most recent study is a matter of concern for me, and I think it has to be a matter of concern for the country, and this is something we have to seriously confront. We are dealing with data that is dated, and if we are not to fly blind, it is necessary for Barbados in every sector to be able to have at its fingertips real-time or as close to real-time information as possible, so as to enable those people who are charged with policy making not to say, I believe, or I think, or I feel, or I imagine. You know, you get a lot of talk about imagining this and that, but ma'am, what we have to do is to be certain with the policy interventions, almost surgical, so as to make sure that they're as appropriate as is possible. The second thing that it tells me, ma'am, is that, quite frankly, the margins under which small and micro businesses are operating are very slender. If your receipts for 42% of the sector is around or less than $100,000, it means effectively, ma'am, that there's really no wiggle room, there is no space really for operational changes, and certainly there is no cushion to deal effectively with the impacts of that which we would have just witnessed in Barbados and continue to witness, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. The third thing, ma'am, is that obviously slender margins mean vulnerability. And we're talking about a sector that is employing 46,000 people. And though I cannot say specifically what is the status of the employment level today across the entire MSME set of enterprises, it is abundantly clear that we're talking about a number, thousands of people, no doubt, who are existing in a state of contingency, even though they are employed. And that is something that we have to deal with if we're going to move this sector, and by extension the country, into acceptable levels of competitiveness. Now, ma'am, to rectify this, the ministry has to do a number of things, and perhaps most important is what we have been seeing in our effort to bring about some COVID relief by way of a benevolent type of funding. And that, ma'am, is to ensure that there is registration of entities across this sector. And the effort to register businesses must now be formalized, it must now be digitalized and modernized. It is important because it assists us to target funding. It is important, ma'am, for that funding which is developmental, for example, that which the trust loans and fund access will do, and equally the type of funding that your house has just approved over the last 3 months, which would have been more of a compassionate nature of intervention because of the COVID relief. And ma'am, while I'm on that point, let me say that again, it is a signal of the government's sincerity in this business of dealing with this sector, that we have between October and today been able to come to this place by way of supplementary to raise $22 million for micro, small, and medium enterprises in Barbados. And I suggest to you, ma'am, that you will find nowhere else in the English-speaking Caribbean where that has been done. In fact, ma'am, if you compare the commitment of this government to the assistance of this sector with the assistance rendered to the tourism industry, you will see that the investment in this sector, ma'am, is virtually double at this stage that which has been invested in the tourism sector. I would also want to make the point, ma'am, that it is important for us to understand where these businesses are and what they do if we're going to engage in fundamentals such as training. And I'm pleased, ma'am, to be part of a team that has instituted over the course of the last few months, and these estimates commit further capital towards an ongoing program of financial literacy training, ma'am, so that we are in a position to ensure that there is not only business continuity, but there's also the creation and generation of intergenerational wealth. It is exceptionally important, ma'am, that people who are going to go into entrepreneurship as a result of difficulties born out of the company that they were working with as a result of COVID or whatever else. We all know the climate we live in. People are deciding to take the bull by the horns and do their own thing, but they can't be allowed to fly blind. There must be an understanding of what is a marketing plan and how that is designed. There must be an understanding of what is a business plan and how that is drawn up. There must be an understanding of fundamentals like share ownership and equity financing and that type of thing, ma'am. And all too often we see businesses, especially black businesses in Barbados, start and then flounder because there has not been the ongoing relationship of holding their hand and partnering with them to ensure development and continuity. And that is a matter about which I'd be happy to engage further during the course of these discussions. Beyond that, ma'am, there's the need to rebuild and rebrand Barbados and to move us to a position where we are as competitive as possible in the international space. Now, ma'am, one of the things that we are focusing on, and we've committed over $3 million to this effort, is working with the Barbados National Standards Institute to broaden its base of operations, not only in the goods sector, but also the services sector of this economy. Standards training, ma'am, training our people, our business people in understanding what standards are and helping them to achieve those standards is exceptionally important as part of the way forward. It limits, ma'am, substandard services and goods in the economic space. It also serves, ma'am, to enhance the country's competitiveness, whether you are involved in the trade of goods or the production of offering of services. And perhaps more important, ma'am, if we are to ensure that we are going to treat to these businesses as potential export level platforms, then, ma'am, it is essentially important that we defeat technical barriers to trade erected by host countries whose markets we wish to penetrate. So in simple language, ma'am, if you want to sell a service overseas, or if you want to sell a good overseas, very often there will be technical barriers. You will be allowed to do it, but you have to do it in accordance with a certain standard and certain quality. And we have to make sure that our people are cognizant, top of mind awareness of what the quality and standards and best practices are internationally so that they're able to penetrate markets. Otherwise, ma'am, you could throw billions of dollars in the direction of small and micro businesses, but they will not be able to achieve that which we need them to achieve financially. More broadly speaking, ma'am, because I know that there are time constraints, there are some other areas which we have to focus on in terms of the development of this economy and transformation of it. One of them is the national energy policy. I am going to be very pleased if given the opportunity to speak more extensively to that aspect of this ministry's business. It is critical to understand, ma'am, that we are now at the completion stage of a long negotiation with the Barbados Light and Power that changes the market structure for electricity generation in this country. We will shortly be going to Cabinet, ma'am, with 3 licenses for their approval. And again, I will elaborate more on this, but very briefly, transmission license, a license for dispatch of electricity. They will remain in the hands of the Light and Power exclusively. But competition in the sector for the first time will come about as a result of generation of electricity and storage. It therefore allows every Barbadian potentially to be an independent power producer and to store power, electricity, and to sell it into the grid. The Light and Power will be in this market structure what is called a single buyer or a monopsony, and they will buy and dispatch it across the grid. We also, therefore, ma'am, are giving life to the ideal of renewable energy in all of its variations. Photovoltaics is obviously the one that has the head start at this point. Wind energy is coming on stream. Ma'am, biomass is also coming on stream. And what effectively we will now have to do is to ensure that there is stability in the grid, and that is why the dispatch license is so critical, and we can explain that more as we go forward, because we're dealing with variable types of energy production. Ma'am, beyond that, it is also important for us to capitalize on the opportunity that we now have to bring a large sector of Barbados's entrepreneurs into the mainstream of economic activity. And I speak specifically, ma'am, to those people, very often from working class Barbados, the people who sent us here by their thousands, ma'am, but who, because of the difficulties created by the COVID-induced circumstances in this economy, are forced now to find an existence by way of vending. Now, ma'am, we have to legitimize this business of vending. We have to decriminalize the business of vending. Very often, and I think we've all read it in the papers, we've all heard the lamentations, we know the story. Ma'am, very often, people seeking to have an honest living are treated by the law under the current legal constructs in Barbados as being nothing less than criminal, simply because of the fact that they have erected on a site without permission, or they have placed their goods in a way of obstructing somebody else, or for some other reason. Very often they are treated exceptionally badly in the courts of Barbados. I am an attorney at law, and I can say I have seen it firsthand, ma'am. And I want to say to you that part of that which we were bringing to this Parliament is in very short order, is a now completed vending bill and a policy framework which will see specific zones being created for vendors in Barbados and to empower them. And this is a matter, again, that we will speak to, if given the opportunity, more extensively. And then, ma'am, obviously, as I began, the micro, small, and medium enterprises of this country have to be given the opportunity to reach their maximum potential. And we're doing this, ma'am, by way of a number of policy interventions. There will again be a micro, small, medium enterprises piece of legislation that will come to this House. It has passed the Cabinet of Barbados in the form of a policy framework. And ma'am, what we are essentially looking at doing is giving a range of opportunities to micro and small, medium enterprises in the context of financing opportunities, in the context of developmental opportunities, ma'am, in terms of building a small business network that will effectively be able to not only lend assistance, not only lend funds, but more importantly, to partner with enterprises so that we can monitor almost from the very beginning when you come through our doors and say that you exist and you wish to borrow money or whatever assistance you need, that we know who you are, what you're able to do, help you build yourself from micro to small, from small to medium, and to work to ensure the continuity of the business in Barbados. So that generally, ma'am, is the broad framework within which the ministry is designed, and that is the general direction that the policies will be going in. And I welcome the opportunity to elaborate together with the permanent secretaries, the 3 permanent secretaries here, and the members of the team.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Could you move the head?
Oh, sorry, ma'am. At this stage, I want to move that head 92 stamp part.
Thank you. Just want to remind the House, we are now at the question session, that ministers should not exceed 3 minutes in asking the question, and that includes 3 consecutive supplementary questions in one intervention. And the minister and his party have no more than 5 minutes to respond. And questions must be linked, answers must be linked to the questions. Thank you. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the rules, if I recall correctly, and they're still the same, allow me to make a brief response prior to questions to the presentation of the Honourable Minister for Energy and Small Business and Entrepreneurship. And he started by attesting to the fact that small, medium enterprises are the core of the policy architecture of the ministry which he has the honor to lead. Indeed, in my view, small business, medium-sized businesses, enterprises are really at the heart of the Barbadian economy, and therefore we need to do all we can to ensure that they flourish and are viable, and that they are supported, and that they may grow, because they employ a lot of people. In the last several years, they have been under stress. I've raised the concern here that the numbers perhaps have significantly diminished if you go by the measurement used in terms of those who have looked to government for support in these trying COVID times and who have actually been supported by government in these times. I believe that the Honourable Minister, being disposed as he is, would share with me the perspective that wealth consolidation in Barbados is a big problem. Wealth consolidation among certain elements of corporate Barbados, wealth consolidation among certain privileged elements in the economy, historically has been one of the ugly features of our development and growth as a relatively young economy. And I believe that the minister would share this view with me, and that he would also share the view that government policy must be driven as a priority by a need to redress that situation and to create such space, not only for vendors but for others, other small and medium-sized enterprises, that they may grow and that we may move away from that history, which is ours, unfortunately so, of people with connections to the political class, a phrase which I don't like, people with connections to the various administrations over time can have their wishes and aspirations satisfied to the detriment of smaller people of smaller interests in this country. And if the minister does not share that perspective with me, I would be shocked. I would be more surprised, and I would urge him publicly to state where he stands on that, because that's certainly my perspective. Often they're excluded from the table, small business people, and the benefits are shared in a discriminatory fashion among those who are already significantly privileged. Small and medium-sized enterprises, as I said, generate substantial numbers of employment when they are viable. They develop the skills of entrepreneurship, which we want to develop as an economy. They use local resources a lot of the time, which we want to see happen, because that in itself spawns other businesses. They tend to give perhaps a greater emphasis to innovation. We would like to see them, of course, involved much more so in export. I'm trying to underscore the importance of these small and medium-sized enterprises, and to suggest that the policy of government should make sure that any discriminatory and disadvantageous policy positions are removed, and that such is created that would cause them to find a new experience, a new level of viability. Operational costs, as the minister himself has suggested, often constitute a significant impediment to the viability. But these operational costs are impacted by government imposts, by government impositions, by taxes and levies and other imposts that are put in place by the government itself. So government is not without blame when it comes to the matter of the operational costs of small businesses that keep them suppressed, that erode the base for viability. The government is not to be excluded from the blame with respect to that, because government policy with respect to taxation and levies, contributions, whatever you call it, impact negatively small business. There's energy costs, of course, and there's the cost of other supplies, cost of raw materials, other supplies. And those costs of supplies themselves are impacted by government taxation policy, and then you have that ripple effect. So if, in fact, small businesses, medium-sized enterprises constitute the core of the policy, I would anticipate and hope that over the next 2 or 3 hours, as the minister exposes the policy position and the program position to us in this debate, that we will hear some of these things being mentioned. Now, with respect to energy, Madam Chair, I hope that during the course of this debate, as we look at these figures, we will see where it is the ministry's understanding that the role of the Fair Trading Commission, utilities regulation, is absolutely important. I say that against a backdrop where we still have a persistent situation of a monopoly in the area of electricity generation and distribution in Barbados. We still have substantially a monopoly with respect to that. We also have a situation now that's growing worse, Madam Speaker, and that's my experience with the telecommunications entities in Barbados. Service is absolutely poor, especially with reference to one of them. So what the role of the utility regulators, the role of the Fair Trading Commission, other entities such as that, which relate to ministries of commerce and business in Barbados, I would expect that the estimates will be showing us in some significant fashion that government treats to the important role that these entities have to play, and that they do so in a very serious way. Now, Madam Chair, it is my view that there are some tensions existing with respect to the energy sector, and especially when we come to the business of the renewables. Now, there's, in my view, as far as I'm advised, as far as my reading has led me to understand, there is, in my view, significant potential interest for investment in the renewable energy sector in Barbados. Now, this is a relatively new sector for us. We want to be able to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel-based industries in Barbados and other activity, including transportation. Our dependency is about 90% or even more. Figures vary, but somewhere in that ballpark, somewhere in that region. We want to reduce that. And of course, as we move within the context of our renewable energy agenda, there is going to be foreign interests, investment interests expressed in this. And that can create, and I already sense that it's creating a level of tension. If you take entities such as Williams Industries that have expressed significant interest in getting into the renewable sector in a bigger way, want to produce X amount of energy, would like to be able to benefit from X amount of licenses, but the concern is might not be able to do that. This government, by its policy, as far as I understand it, has indicated that 30% slice of that renewable energy cake would be reserved for Barbados. And one questions whether that is sufficient. That would allow domestic investment interests to significantly represent themselves and significantly pursue the kind of development programs that these entities would like to pursue in the interest of Barbados, so that we can reduce that dependency on fossil fuels and really create a platform for renewable energies in Barbados, which is viable. There is some tension, I believe, as well, between entities engaged in solar thermal energy provision in Barbados and the newer photovoltaic systems. And I would be interested to see what is said by this ministry that indicates that government has an appreciation for the solar thermal systems input into energy contribution in Barbados, seeing that they have been there for quite a while. I was surprised to find that the level of penetration is as low as it is, but they've been there, 2 or 3 entities, and long established. There's some tension which created between the policy preferences, which seem to suggest that there is an advantage given in the case of photovoltaics as opposed to the solar thermal systems. I don't want to be too long because I have some questions that I'm sure the minister would want the opportunity to answer with his support team. But simply to say small business is crucial, and we've got to pave the way that it develops, and we've got to remove some of the impediments, and that is my policy, and we hope to see it represented in these figures. And our renewables are important for various reasons, but there's some impediments long established and existing, and some tensions around that the policy that comes from this ministry should indicate its intention to address. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. The House is open to questions. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. James Central for his presentation on the area of commerce, small business and energy. I have a number of questions which the good people of St. James South have asked me to ask on their behalf. And therefore I would like to put them to the Honourable Minister and hear what his team will share with us today. In St. James South, we have a number of small businesses. We have some that are registered and have registered for NIS and have their licenses and so on. But I do have a number of people who are very informal. And one of the concerns that they have had, I think the issue of COVID has highlighted the fact that when you don't pay NIS, it puts you in a problem, and when you're not properly registered. So some of them would like to get registered, but I think some of them may be afraid to step forward now for fear that they may be liable for hundreds of thousands of dollars because of all the long years that they may have been operating. So they want to know what can be done that they can come forward from over the shadows and be able to properly register their businesses. And then I have a follow-up question from that as well, Madam Chair.
I'm not sure, ma'am, that the question directed to me is sent to or focused, targeted at the most appropriate place. I think that my friend and neighbor in St. James knows well that the matters relating to the way in which NIS and any other statutory obligation of that nature would work would probably have to have the imprimatur of the Ministry of Finance. If the member is asking me what my view is personally, then I would say this. I genuinely feel that the lesson that we have learned over the last few months, especially the period of this second pause or shutdown, has been that there are a number of businesses which are functioning in Barbados, which are, as I said before, in a very limited space in terms of financial wiggle room, financial maneuvering room. To the extent that they are seeing profits, they see profits on very slender margins. The reality is that what we have recognized is that there was a reluctance on some people's parts to come forward by virtue of the same point that the Honourable Member quite rightly makes with regard to NIS, and it was therefore not a consideration for the assistance given at this time. But it is important for companies, businesses, all to register. I have made the point before that at its lowest level, we are talking about something in the vicinity of $20, $21 perhaps a week for your NIS contributions. If you were selling coconuts, to give an example, you would therefore be selling 2 bottles of coconut water in order to be able to make that first contribution to the NIS. And thereafter, the rest is at you. The point that I'm trying to drive at is that I agree it is exceptionally important. Government cannot help in the way that we would want to help, especially in circumstances such as those that confront the country right now, if there is no fund and no fund being financed by the same community of working population that we're being called on to lend assistance to. So therefore, it is critical that we have that kind of input being made. My personal feeling is that if we want to get people to come forward, it may well be that, as we have had to do with other sectors of the society, that an amnesty type of circumstance may have to be looked at, and to invite people to come in and have the kind of discussion that you want them to have, so that we can put them in a position where we want to be in order to assist. I had the opportunity with P.S. Reed, who sits to my left, of walking, well, not walking, we walked and drove the highway a few Saturdays ago, and talked to virtually every fruit and coconut vendor along that highway. And the reality is that I don't think we came across any who were resistant to the idea of registering. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about it. There's a lot of, again, perhaps a lack of knowledge in some regards. But then, again, that is part and parcel of what we have to do with regard to financial literacy in this country. We have to recognize that people want to be independent. They want to do things themselves by way of business, but they need to be educated along the lines of what it takes to run the business and what the requirements are for that business to succeed. So yes, I don't think that there's any doubt. Certainly the discussions I've had with the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance indicate that he too is very strong on the view that registration is critical. But the question is, how best do we get this achieved? My thinking, and you've only now provoked me to reflect on the methodology this way, but perhaps an amnesty type approach might be useful.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and if you could lend your voice to such a program, I think it would be very helpful, because a number of them would like to formalize, but that is probably one of the main concerns. Another follow-on question from some of the businesses who are registered in St. James South. They would have applied for the assistance during the COVID, and what they were asking is whether or not, how soon they think that they will be able to receive the payment, because some of them have been concerned that they've needed it urgently to assist them during this period, and they have not as yet received the payment. So they just wanted to get an update on that. Thank you.
Ma'am, if I may, I had on the last sitting of this House secured the second supplementary for this type of assistance, and it was in the sum of $6 million. I said at that time that the first payment that we had secured by way of a supplementary, which would have happened, P.S., in February of this year, start of February, would have been in the amount of $3.5 million. So the first point I want to make is that we have, in the course of the last month and a half or so, come to this House and gotten the provisioning for $10 million of this assistance. There are 7,000, according to the last figures I have, 7,700 persons who would have applied for assistance thus far. And I want to underscore two things. There are some people who are still coming into the system belatedly and perhaps for the first time. And I think that is largely because of the fact that there are persons who were very skeptical and very cynical about the offer to lend the assistance in the first place. So they kind of waited, and then they hear, well, you know, I got, or it wasn't so difficult, I got my money, what about you? And then they then come into the system after that. The other challenge that we have had, quite frankly, and I've spoken to this on more than one occasion, is that there has been an unfortunate aspect of our society raised its ugly head when people try to game or play the system. And therefore, it was a requirement that I sat with P.S. Reed and the Director of Commerce, both of whom are here, and I will invite them to elaborate, on finding mechanisms in which we can do the necessary due diligence so that the public purse was not abused. And just to give you an example, there are some people who would have applied 2 or 3 times You track it and you recognize it by virtue of the ID card being the same ID card in each instance, but they are purporting to do something completely different on every occasion. So then it meant having to validate and so on, and that takes some time, largely because of the fact the Ministry of Small Business, the Department of Commerce within the ministry, was not designed to do this type of work. This was a requirement that was called upon us by the Cabinet of Barbados when we felt it necessary to make a serious response to the financial hardship which has been confronting a sector that was forced to go on a period of pause, and even as they were trying to recover from the last impacts of the COVID-19. So that it did not have at its disposal the manpower, quite frankly, the technology, and these are things we had to put in place in order to try to make this work. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the members of staff because they have done yeoman duty, working day and night, Saturdays and Sundays, in some instances very early, midnight at night, there were people trying to make this possible. The other thing that I need to say is that very often, people have applied, but they have not applied in a way that allows us to assist them as quickly as we want because, and I won't call the person's name, a fairly sophisticated business person actually applied, but could not get his bank account information right. And so therefore, even though it is processed, he can't get it to come to him because the information that he's given to us is inaccurate and we have to go through the process again. And I think in that case, it may have happened twice. Now, those are some of the reasons why there's a delay. Clearly, $3.5 million could not deal with the totality of the demand, and that is why we had to come back for further supplementary. And between the time when the money would have run out, the $3.5 million, and then when we got the supplementary, may have been a few days. The reality is that it is continuing, and yes, it takes a little time, but I am very satisfied that people are getting paid. It is not an overnight thing. It is not a fast food business. We are sensitive to the fact that it was meant to assist people in their hour of need, but just as with the care packages exercise, it is an imperfect system, but we are trying our best to make sure that there is a delivery as quickly as possible, even as we must dot I's and cross T's on the fundamental and inescapable responsibility to make sure that we do not allow people to trick the system or trick the government and walk away getting 2 or 3 or 4 times that which they were supposed to get. P.S. Reed and Director of Commerce, P.S. you feel free to comment if you wish to.
Say is that you said it all, because the problems that they had would have been the case with people putting in wrong bank accounts.
Sorry, P.S. Reed, could you introduce yourself for our purposes?
SR3, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, the Small Business Division. Now, what I was saying is that the minister said it all, because he pointed to the fact that some people were putting in wrong bank accounts. Some people were applying 3 and 4 and 5 times, so they had to try to go through it and make sure and verify the truth, which ones were legitimate. Then there were also cases where I understand people had owned 3 and 4 and 5 different businesses, and they were therefore applying in all 3 and 4 and 5. And some of them were actually doing similar work in the different businesses that they had. So the purpose was to ensure that everybody get some kind of assistance, and it wasn't concentrated into one particular area or one particular person. So that's all I think I have to say.
I hope that satisfies the Honourable Member, ma'am.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
President, good morning, honorable member, minister. I want to thank you and your team for gracing us with your presence this morning. I just want to ask a question. I know that, first of all, let me congratulate you and thank you for working with unreserved energy, enterprise, and entrepreneurship to help augment the small, the medium, and the entire business sector in this country. My question to you, Minister, and it is not a secret that your ministry, in terms of the energy sector, is able to provide for this entire country not only energy to fuel the entire industry, but as a consequence, your ministry is able to allow in the atmosphere about 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas and a very serious detriment to our ozone. As minister responsible for the environment, this is a big concern for me. You produce about 80% of that carbon dioxide. I'm asking you, and I know if you're looking at the 1.6, we can go down to 1.5. That is the amount of barrels, 1.5 million or so, of barrels of oil that is brought into this country yearly. I want to ask you, what is your ministry doing collectively to ensure that by 2030, we become fossil fuel free and that there is a reduction in the amount of certainly carbon dioxide exposed to the atmosphere, and to ensure that we can tell the rest of the world that we have a space in the renewable sphere, as I call it. So you can probably elaborate and elucidate so that we can have a fulsome understanding of where your ministry is going to reduce the fossil fuel in this country. Thank you.
Ma'am, I welcome the question. I thank the honorable member for his well-established sincerity and effort with respect to the issue of environment. And I kid him not, it was as late as 7 o'clock yesterday evening when I was on a call with the CEO of the Barbados Light and Power in an effort to close the discussions on the last remaining issue relating to the energy license, a condition which is known famously between myself and my permanent secretary of energy as condition 14. It has been the bane of our existence now for the last week and a half, but I am happy to report that he assures me today we've come to a conceptual understanding and a conceptual alignment, and therefore that puts us in a position to allow lawyers to do what lawyers have to do in order to finalize language, which they are doing now, and hopefully we will be in a position then to go to Cabinet and to the Office of the Attorney General for their imprimatur in the course of the next week or so. But specifically, I was saying to him that the challenge I have is that I am only one member of the Cabinet, and there is a voice, meaning yours, Minister of Environment, which contends robustly on questions of the environment and the way in which we treat to the environment. And I want to make my position very clear. The ministry has outlined a vision for 2030 as being the point at which we draw the line in the sand on the importation of fossil fuel in Barbados, and that we rely on renewables and we rely on forms of energy which are less polluting to the atmosphere. Your concern is entirely legitimate. The need for us to do this transformation in the way in which we produce and generate energy in Barbados is twofold. There are two types of advantages, and it is important that the country understands them. The first advantage is that it gives us an opportunity to democratize the generation of energy. For over 100 years, the Barbados Light and Power has enjoyed a monopoly in this country on the generation of energy. We are breaking the back of that monopoly completely, and we are going to have, for the first time ever, competition in the generation and in the storage of energy. It means, therefore, that at household level, an individual can say to their family, look, we wish to free ourselves of the shackles of reliance on the light and power, and we put photovoltaics on the roof, and therefore, or in the backyard, however you wish to erect it, and therefore we can run the 3 kilowatts or 4 kilowatts that the household needs on a monthly basis. We can do that to make sure that we look after ourselves without having to worry about a reliance other than for backup on the light and power. In the event that you want to have backup storage, you can do that too. And so therefore you can make yourself completely independent. And I will, as we go forward, invite some of the members of my staff to elaborate further. The other thing that it does, and the other advantage is this, it diversifies the way in which we generate electricity. And so therefore, we introduce the photovoltaics by way of solar, we introduce wind energy, we introduce biomass, and the ministry right now is locked into a number of studies. Perhaps the most important of them is the IRRP, the Integrated Resilience Research Study, which allows us to test what the demand for energy is in Barbados, and to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what it is that we need to be able to supply in the context of the variables that are renewable energy, because you have to remember every day is not a sunny day. Renewable energy is a variable, intermittent type of thing. You may have rain one day, clouds, and so on and so forth. Wind is a similar thing. Every day is not going to be windy and that type of thing. But you have to make sure that when these are captured, when these forms of energies are captured and then fed into the grid, that there is not volatility which can compromise the certainty of supply, because then you will find yourself in a situation where there's instability in the grid. I do not pretend to be a technician, a technical expert in these matters, but that is really what the concern of the ministry is. So that we draw the line in the sand, to answer your question, Minister, with regard to 2030, and it gives a planning window for the country of 9 years from where we are now, for us to move all of our business interests, all of our household interests, all of our transportation interests to this stage. Now, I'm going to invite the Permanent Secretary to elaborate further, but I would want to say this. A critical component of this discussion that we have not been having in Barbados is what happens with regard to transportation. And there, you will be pleased to know, as Minister of the Environment, that e-mobility is at the forefront of our thinking. We need, and it will have to happen over the course of the next few years, within the context of another reality, which is that we don't produce any vehicles in Barbados. We import all of them. And the production horizons in Japan, for example, where we get most of our vehicles from, and in Europe, where we get the rest of them from, are very short windows. So they're talking about planning production over 5 years. We need to know that we are going to be in a position to adequately have the transformation of the vehicles that are currently on the streets of Barbados into a state where they can burn alternative forms of energy, or alternatively, with regard to brand new vehicles that are going to be brought in, we would want to see an increase in the presence of electronically operated vehicles. And that is a conversation, again, which we can have with regard to that if a more specific question is asked. PS?
Thank you, Minister. The question is what?
Ma'am, please introduce yourself.
My name is Francine Blackman, and I'm the Permanent Secretary acting for the Division of Energy. The question asked was, what is it that we're doing, our ministry is doing, to assist Barbados to reduce its reliance, basically, on fossil fuel? And this has started really with our energy policy. We have an energy policy that looks out to 2030, where we by that time, have determined that Barbados should be fossil fuel free. And that vision has therefore driven the work of the ministry. We've sought to explore, through Minister indicated, our integrated resource and resilience plan, which helps us to determine very definitively the mix of renewable energy technologies, and also to determine the capacity that we would have to install over different time periods to be able to get to 100% by 2030. This movement also not only looks at electricity, but also looks at the transport sector, as Minister did indicate, which actually uses a third of the fossil fuel consumption in Barbados. So that is a very large subsector that we would also need to convert. And therefore the ministry is exploring a number. I heard earlier the question was raised about how do we make sure that Barbadians are able to participate, and whether or not the 30% that has been spoken of is sufficient. So the ministry actually has done a number of foundational work this year to be able to help us to reach, if you think of the analogy of building or the construction of a house, the vision is certainly the roof, and we've been trying to make sure then that we put all the foundation things together. Apart from the IRRP, we've also looked at the grid, and we recognize that the renewables is a variable technology, and we needed to make sure that Barbados, who over the years have enjoyed a good service in terms of our electricity, we've been able to grow businesses, tourism, and so on, because we've had reliable electricity. So the intent is, while we transition certainly from fossil fuel, that we're able to maintain that same standard, and we don't now drive the country into brownouts and blackouts and so on. So we've looked at a maximum export study, which is a sub-study that was conducted under the Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan. And this helps us to understand down at the substation level, certainly at the feeder level, the amount of renewables that can go in the different communities across the grid in Barbados. And this type of information now would help us to also communicate to investors, to developers, to Barbadians, where the opportunities lie across the grid for investment and what amount can go in. So it makes the planning then much easier to do. So apart from that, we've also looked at the ocean. And I have my project manager there only recently concluded some work in this area, because we recognize, again, because of Barbados' limited landmass, we needed to explore what opportunities the ocean has for us. And that piece of work, we looked at whether we can site offshore wind turbines there, whether it could be fixed or floating, and we also looked at how we can use wave technology also to help us through OTEC to produce energy. And that piece of work has been very, very, very promising. And we believe, as we assimilate these different types of technologies, that the vision is not far out of reach, and we actually can realize getting to 100% by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member?
I want to thank you, Minister, for elucidating on and giving Barbadians the calm assurance that you have a sustainable development plan that allows every single Barbadian to have a sense of ownership in the renewable energy sector, and I want to thank you for that. I heard you spoke earlier about, my follow-up question, you spoke earlier about the alternative energies that you'll be exploiting in your ministry, the wind, the photovoltaic, your PS spoke just now about the fact that you're also looking at the wave energy as alternative ways of securing the energy sector that is not fossil fuel. What I want to ask is that, are there any plans, any advancement, any studies being done on the geothermal energy sector? Because this is an alternative that I think that once the conditions are ripe, that we can exploit it as a small island developing state. So are there any plans in your ministry to look at this as an alternative sector as well, to provide and obviously reduce our fossil fuel? Because we have told the international world and all in earshot that by 2030, Barbados will be able to say as a small island developing state and a leader that we have reduced our carbon dioxide levels by 1.5 billion tons. And based on the fact that the world produces about 50 billion tons or so a year, it may be small, but it shows that a small island state like ours can punch above our weight. So I just want to know if you are looking to exploit the geothermal energy as an alternative. Thanks.
Again, Minister, your sincerity and depth of understanding on these matters speaks for itself. I believe that it would be correct for me to say to you that it perhaps is not the appropriate part of the option of menus for the menu of options for Barbados, largely because of the fact that the geothermal energy that you were speaking about has been more suited to substrata found in places which are volcanic, like St. Lucia, Montserrat, etc., as opposed to the limestone structures in Barbados. To give you a certain sense of assurance in that regard, I would again ask BS to speak to the issue.
Thank you. I also have my Director of Natural Resources that can certainly provide you with fuller information on it. But Barbados's geographical location and the fact that the island is mainly of limestone does not provide us with that luxury, does not provide us with that opportunity to look at geothermal. So the options available to us are really wind, solar, using the ocean, and using biomass as a technology. And then supporting those intermittent technologies with storage to transform them from being intermittent to more of a dispatchable, which then kind of mirrors the features that fossil fuel brings, because fossil fuel then allows the energy to be dispatchable, where we can transfer it from one location to another, and we can use it at different times during the day or night. But renewables does not provide that type of luxury, so the sun only shines during the day. So to be able to allow us then to use the energy from the rays of the sun during the day at night, then we have to add another technology to it to be able to use storage, then that we can dispatch that energy during the night. But I would want to ask Mr. White if he would be so kind as to elaborate a little bit more on our geotechnical construct of Barbados with respect to the geothermal. Mr. White?
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question, Honourable Member. My name is Jamar White. I am the Director of Natural Resources in the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and a geologist by profession. As rightfully explained by the Minister and the Permanent Secretary, unfortunately, but Barbados does not have the benefit of the option of geothermal energy. And as rightfully stated, it's due to our geographical location as well as our geological makeup. So geologically, we are a sedimentary island. So we consist of limestone as well as sands and muds and other clastic sediments that are located below Barbados. And we actually have a quite low geothermal gradient, which basically outlines the changes in temperature as you go deeper below the surface. When compared to some of our neighbors in the smaller islands, in the Lesser Antilles, they have quite high geothermal gradients because of their geological makeup. Those islands are volcanic in origin. They're formed as a result of the upwelling of magma from deep below the surface. And as a result of that, they would have very high temperatures and high geothermal gradients that would allow for the development of geothermal energy. So while we brag of our geographical location in terms of our climate, in terms of our ability in terms of the weather and climate and stuff like that, we would not have the benefit of having the geothermal energy as some of our neighbors would. So I hope that provides an explanation in terms of the potential use of that energy. So we are blessed in terms of wind, in terms of sun, in terms of ocean energy. We have a very large offshore maritime space, but we at this point in time would not be able to exploit geothermal energy because of our geological and geographical makeup. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a couple of questions that relate to the numbers, the figures in the document, subprogram 0461, line 785, which I think has to do with construction. It talks about 5 facilities to be constructed. I just wanted to know where and purpose. In subprogram 052, line 226, is a professional service provision. It's $1.5 million. Now the document I have, ma'am, has no information at all, no details in columns 1, 2, and 3. That is actual expenditure for 2019-2020, approved estimates 2020-21, and revised estimates 2021. So all I'm seeing is a column 21-22, which is what you're asking for, and then a projection for 22-23 and 23-24. But I have no reference to look at in terms of how we got to this point. But the figure is 1.5 million. It's this program subprogram 0452, and it's line 226, and it's $1.5 million. I want to know, where is it projected to be repeated in 22-23 and in 23-24? It first appears on my document in 21-22. There's nothing in 2021. And the other one, ma'am, relates to subprogram 0453 at line 226. Again, is professional services fees, and it's for $500,000, and it relates to the offshore drilling, offshore exploration. Simply like to ask where we are with the offshore exploration project. That's one. 2, what does this 1.5 million represent in subprogram 0452, and how come we are projecting for next year and the year beyond the same figure? And where are the 5 facilities to be located, purpose for which they'll be constructed? Subprogram 0461, line 785.
If I may, ma'am, while my permanent secretaries, both from the Energy Division and the Small Business Division, identify the specifics of the sub-programs that the Honourable Member has alluded to, I will attempt to begin the discourse with regard to those questions that are not targeted to the accounting heads. The 5 facilities to be constructed really represent a toe in the water with regard to what I alluded to earlier as part of the creation along the streets of Barbados of zones for vendors to be able to operate. The fact of the matter is, let me just deal with it conceptually first. We have, it is the judgment of the ministry and it is the judgment of the cabinet that we have to give purpose and meaning to this ideal of making vending a legitimized form of business. It therefore means that we cannot continue to have vendors operating almost on a willy-nilly basis alongside the streets. Guys and ladies who are trying to earn a living but are deprived, bereft, and have been for years in a state of permanent almost contingency, where they are selling their wares and goods, whatever that may be. And let us use the coconut vendor, because that is an example that perhaps every single Barbadian understands, because almost every Barbadian has stopped along the road to buy some coconut water. You are asking people to earn a living. They begin by arriving on site around 7, 8 in the morning, in some instances perhaps even earlier, and continue to work on that site until 4 or so in the evening. Now, the facilities of the location where they are is just the roadway. There is no running water. There is no bathroom facility. They are restricted in the hours they work, because there comes a point of time where you have to clear up everything and get it to the dump, which closes by a certain time. So even at the level of government's facilitation of this type of business, and we in Barbados have for too long sought to interpret this facilitation as being something that relates to an investor with several $1 million in his pocket coming here and saying that he wants to get through town planning fast, or the Ministry of the Department of Immigration fast. The reality is that we have to facilitate every class and every level of business person in Barbados. And so therefore, the fact that the dump will close at 6 o'clock on the evening means that if I am to make sure that I don't offend my friend, the Minister for the Environment, or the Minister responsible for public health, that there must be a cleanup of the coconut shells within sufficient time to get to the dump before they close. If, however, we had longer hours of operation, and if, however, we had at the dump, and if, however, we had a facility where there could be some lighting along those zones where we want to have people vending, so that they can continue to ply their trade later into the evening, if that is their wish, as I have seen firsthand in places like Ghana, and the Honourable Member for St. Philip West and I would have traveled along a roadway where we pass at night, 7, 8 o'clock, and the vendors were as busy, and in fact more busy at 7 or 8 in the night than they were when we passed them at 9 in the morning. The reality is, ma'am, that we have to transform the reality of how our vending community exists, and to bring them into the 21st century with all the modern amenities of the 21st century. And so therefore we have begun the process of identifying places along the highway where we will, given the limitations of the public purse at this time, be in a situation to start to create zones which would be easy in terms of access, because vehicles will be able to pull off of the main highway, go into an artery which perhaps runs parallel to the highway. You will have an area specially designed so that you have stalls, you have lighting, you have running water, you have bathroom facilities. In other words, all the comforts that will make it conducive for not only Barbadians, but also for our visitors who may be on a tour bus going to some location, but then they stop and see all of the coconuts being sold and say, oh, I would like to experience that. And the tour bus pulls off, and there may be some seating where people can get their commodities, and off they go again. This has to be done across a number of areas in Barbados. Cabinet will have to make the final determination of all the spots. I can say to you that on 2 Saturdays ago, when I went to Warrens with my permanent secretary, we looked at the Warrens area. I know that a few days later, the Prime Minister would have gone to Warrens with a similar view in mind, accompanied by the Honourable Member for St. John in his capacity as Minister in the Ministry for Public Works. And that is one area that we're definitely looking at. I can also say to you that there is already in the town planning division plans which exist for the Top Rock area, And again, that is an area which we're looking at. I would not be in a position to say definitively to this House that we have identified all of the areas, but the conversation I would have had with the Minister of Finance in the preparation for these estimates is that I think time has come for us to make a start, and that we wanted to have the money made available so as to be able to begin the process. Now, clearly, there are going to be a number of areas which will have to have these vending zones, because quite frankly, there are more vendors in Barbados now than ever before. And again, that is just another reality of the COVID-induced environment. Our challenge is to be able to facilitate them in as best a manner as possible without endangering public well-being because of their close proximity to the highway as they now are. And that was the reason why, one of the reasons why I would have gone to have those conversations with vendors. They fully understand the circumstances within which they work, and I think they fully understand the dangers of close proximity to the highway. It is the duty of government now, which has failed the people for successive administrations, to step up to the plate and to rectify this set of circumstances so that people will be able to function in a more comfortable way. With regard to offshore exploration, the offshore exploration efforts would have been paused after we had successfully concluded a unitization agreement between the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Barbados, which would have been sometime in March or so of last year. That unitization agreement allows us to be able to share along the borders, maritime border between the two countries, drilling operations, so that it would now no longer be possible. I'm not saying that it has happened, but I'm saying it was possible for it to happen, that a country with substantially more experience in deep sea oil exploration, like Trinidad, would have been in a position to have seismic data on wells which border the line between Barbados and themselves, do drilling which can now not necessarily only be done vertically, but laterally as well. And so you drill across the line, how many other thousands of feet below sea level. Neither you, honorable member, nor I would have a clue about what is going on, but you tap into the reserves and you draw all that you have to draw, and that was a possibility. I emphasize it was a possibility, not that it happened. And therefore, what we have been able to achieve, and this was concluded just before there was a change, a reshuffle of the cabinet, was the unitization agreement, which allows now for there to be a practical meeting of minds between two responsible countries in the way in which we treat to these matters of shared, sharing the drilling operations in the maritime space between us. The COVID-19 circumstances did not spare the energy sector, and therefore there was a pause in the process of our offshore exploration preparations between March or April of last year and now. We expect that in the second quarter of this year, we will be ready to launch a road show, to host a road show, which will see the blocks in the maritime space of Barbados being available for potential investment and expression of interest for those persons or those entities which have an interest in the seismic data and the opportunity to drill in the maritime acreage of the country. The necessary preparatory work has been completed. Logos have been designed. The marketing work has been done. The consultants have been put in place. And if the honorable member is desirous of further explanation or elaboration, I suspect that Mr. Jamar White could speak more substantively to that matter. Perhaps, ma'am, I could pause and allow Mr. White to speak, and then we revert to the question about subprogram 052 and the other subprogram that was addressed the question of $1.5 million for consultancy. I am not sure which division. It might be helpful if the honourable member just indicates which division this 1.5 million is, because I was not able to take a detailed note while he was speaking. It's both for energy? Oh, both for energy. So PS Energy will speak to both of those, and I will invite Mr. Jamar White to further elaborate on the offshore sector.
Again, Jamar White, Director of Natural Resources. Thank you for your question, Honorable Chair, Leader of the Opposition. Expanding on the very comprehensive outline provided by the Minister, just to give a brief background as well. So in January 2020, Barbados would have awarded effective licenses to an Australian oil and gas exploration company known as BHP to explore our offshore acreage in search of hydrocarbons. BHP was awarded 2 blocks in the offshore, Carlisle Bay and Bimshire, which are located to the southeast of Barbados. As Minister explained, exploration activities were due to commence last year, but unfortunately were delayed because of the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. Caused restrictions on travel, restrictions on conducting business operations. So we're now at the stage where the company is ready to commence its offshore exploration work in 2021. Over the last year, while we were on pause due to COVID, we were negotiating with the company to determine ways in which we could improve the exploration work program. We've come up with some solutions to that. So the company has since applied for a license to amend the exploration work programs to move straight into collecting 3-dimensional seismic data. So under the licenses, the company was originally contracted to shoot 2-dimensional or 2D seismic data in the first phase. However, in recognizing that 3D provides a much better picture of the subsurface and allows for reducing the risks in the exploration phase, we felt that it would be good to remove the requirement to acquire 2D seismic and move straight to acquiring 3D seismic in the first phase. So that's one of the benefits that's come out of the negotiations over the last year. So prior to commencing exploration work, we also negotiated with the company to conduct critical stakeholder and public consultations with the Barbadian public to get valuable feedback that would help to inform the exploration activities. You would appreciate that offshore oil and gas exploration is not something that's very well known in Barbados. We hear about it in our neighboring countries in Guyana, Trinidad. But in seeking to start this new exploration, we felt it necessary for the company to sit down with Barbadians and get feedback in terms of how they feel about offshore oil and gas exploration, answer some of their concerns, let them outline some of the queries, and maybe provide feedback that would help to improve the collaboration with the company and the way the company communicates with Barbadians. So those stakeholder consultations are scheduled for Q2 of this year. So we would ask the public to listen out for the invitation to participate, and please be very open and frank in providing any feedback or recommendations to the company. Also, prior to the start of the work, the company has to complete what we call an environmental baseline survey. And this survey seeks to assess the baseline conditions in the offshore. So before you start any exploration, it's critical to understand what your baseline conditions are. So what are the current conditions with the currents, with the air quality, with the marine flora and fauna, with your sediment and the seabed, so that once operations start, we can clearly have a baseline against which we can measure the impacts of the offshore oil and gas exploration activities. So the company is also scheduled to complete the second phase of the baseline survey studies in Q2 of this year. And those studies and the stakeholder consultations would then lead into the formal commencement of the offshore exploration work, which would be the acquisition of the 3D seismic data, which I spoke to. And that's planned for Q3 of this year. Out of this work, we expect to get significant training opportunities for our local professionals and UWI students, opportunities for conducting research studies in terms of the coastal and marine environment, as well as training and capacity building by utilizing the funds that the company has made available to develop local content here in Barbados. As the Minister also indicated, in addition to the work being done by BHP, or to be done by BHP, we are also seeking to license additional blocks in the offshore to bring in some more investment into the country and hopefully attract some other oil and gas companies to explore our offshore. I mean, everybody is aware of what's happening in Guyana, and we feel that we still have a lot to offer in terms of our offshore potential, and we'll be seeking to license some of those additional blocks later this year to bring in some more companies. Finally, I would add a bit of information to what the Minister mentioned in relation to the treaty with Trinidad. That treaty was critical because of the expertise that Trinidad has and because of our close proximity, and always working together is always better than trying to operate individually. And out of that work, I don't know if it's a benefit, but I can say luckily, BHP is the same company that's operating on the Trinidad side of the Barbados-Trinidad border. And really it helps us in terms of the communication between Barbados and Trinidad, having the same company operating on both sides of the boundary. So with Trinidad seeking to expand its offshore exploration near to the border and having made some significant discoveries over the last 2 years adjacent to the border, we feel that the unitization treaty will bring significant benefits for us to collaborate in terms of our offshore oil and gas exploration as we move forward. So that work is expected to also move forward in this year as well. So I hope that provides a good overview for the Leader of the Opposition in terms of the question he asked about our plans for the offshore. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would now invite PS Blackman to speak to the issues of the sub-program 0452 and the other one raised by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Minister. In my initial presentation, I spoke about some of the activities that the ministry needed to undertake to build that foundation to make sure that our policy was back, had a good footing. And during this year, we undertook a number of studies and research to help us understand the trajectory of the decision, certainly to move the country towards 100% renewables. Part of that work, we took a look at developing requirements for wind, because while the country has, in the past, over 100 windmills that would have dotted the island, certainly in the days of slavery, if you look around now, none of those wind turbines are really in existence. And we have become quite urbanized, and there's hardly much difference between certainly what one may consider to be rural versus urban Barbados. So we had to take a look at what would be the requirements for us to seriously implement wind as a viable technology for us, as one of the choices to move in towards renewables. So we did some research that allow us to establish wind corridors, and in so doing, also work with Town Planning Department to look at developing the requirements, establishing the regulatory requirements to allow us to insert wind. We also did that with the undertaking an EV study, electric vehicle study, to address the transport sector, sorry. And there was also a biofuel study headed by PS Gittins, which sought to look at alternate fuels. I mentioned the IRRP and the maximum export study, and then we also took a look because we recognized that our march to 2030 could be impeded if we didn't understand the revenue side of what we're doing, where government revenue basically takes a substantive sum from fossil fuels. And as we are converting more and more to renewables, what is the impact of that decision then in terms of government's revenue? So it's this collection of information that has helped us to get a greater understanding of how do we assimilate and move forward with renewables. And therefore, for the coming financial year, we continue to build out on that knowledge, because we are, as Minister indicated, we've transformed the energy sector where the market is one that is now going to be of a monopsony as opposed to a monopoly. I believe one may still argue a monopoly from the perspective that you have only one buyer, a single buyer. But we needed to understand what that market represents. And then because the licenses that we've negotiated, we recognize that the BLPC will still be the person or entity who will be operating the dispatch license, and they're also going to be competing with integrated other IPPs, which is independent power producers. So with that construct, we needed to make sure then that we design sufficient compliances and regulatory decisions or policies to allow for a market that would then be more transparent and to be able to give investors the assurance that they can come into Barbados, or local entrepreneurs to also invest in the energy sector and be assured that the energy that they produce will have an equal opportunity for being dispatched to the grid. So for 2020, for this year into 2021, this work continues. Part of the 1.5 is not one specific consultancy, but certainly a series of consultancies to continue to address and to help us build out the policy based on evidence. So we recognize that as we move to 2030, we have a pricing policy in place at this point, a feed-in tariff, that addresses how persons who supply their energy are paid for their energy. And we also recognize, though, that that approach is more of a passive one, where we wait in the ministry until people approach us and say we want to have a license to produce. And we recognize that if we are going to accelerate the capacity, the procurement of capacity, we needed to also look at implementing another methodology, and that is a competitive procurement process. So that is part of the 1.5 million. We also recognize, I spoke to the fact that the BLPC will be the person who is the systems operator, basically operating that dispatch license, and they're simultaneously a competitor. So to address that situation, we felt it was necessary to build out a dispatch code that allows the sector and the industry to understand what is the components and makeup of their energy being dispatched, and understanding the merit order in which how their energy is likely to be dispatched to the grid, again creating a sense of transparency in the marketplace because of this situation. We also felt that, as I mentioned earlier, we needed to make sure that the energy from renewables is such that it is dispatchable. And we recognize that storage is basically the backbone to underpin this intermittent renewable energy. And therefore, we recognize that storage brings a lot of benefits to the grid that it will not, that it naturally had as a fossil fuel grid. We needed to recreate that same type of benefit through renewables. And therefore, part of this 1.5 million also takes a look at developing a policy for storage, understanding the different types of services that storage can provide to the grid to give that support, and thereafter having determined the types of services that we would need, then the FTC would be able to, Fair Trading Commission, would then be able to establish a tariff for these different services, again, to support persons who would want to make that investment in storage. So it's a number of consultancies that when you roll them up, they equate to that sum and not just simply one consultancy. Thank you.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Ma'am, thank you, and thank you for your responses, Minister and team. Now, I know a lot of what is done in this ministry, especially on the energy side, is technically related, and therefore of such a nature as that you have to obviously buy in some skills and some consultancies and professional services. But you're asking for $34 million, I think it is, for this ministry. Like I said, my documents don't have all the numbers. I don't know why, Madam Chair. I don't know if you can help me with that one. But you're asking for $34 million. And to me, a lot of the funds requested relate to consultancies and professional services. Now, it might seem to some that I harp on this, but especially if we deal with taxpayers' money, then we have to ask the questions to get the answers. But for $34 million that you're asking, would the ministry be satisfied that the component part of that relates to professional services and consultancies is appropriate? I mean, we got one program here, Madam Chair, one program, and it has to do with the Smart Energy Fund, and I suppose there's a unit established around that. If you look at the non-statutory recurrent expenditure being requested, it's about 1.6 million. But out of that, you got professional service of $870,000, which is 50% for the whole unit, 50%. And if you look over the entire ministry, professional services, consultancy fees, the number to me is high as a layperson. I would want to hear the ministry just justify that. I know you justified it just now with respect to one particular program. But if you're asking for $34 million, what percentage of that to consultancies and professional fees would you consider to be appropriate?
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question, because it gives us a much needed opportunity to highlight the challenge that is confronting not just this ministry, but confronting the country as we undertake what is a heroic effort to transform us from fossil fuel reliance into an entirely RE-powered society and economy. And I don't say that lightly, ma'am. The truth of the matter is that many countries have given themselves windows of 30 years or more, some instances 40 years or more, to do that which we are attempting to do in 11 years. And the Leader of the Opposition is entirely right when he says that the skill sets that are required to guide us so that we can be sure-footed in the policy implementation do not exist on island and therefore have to be purchased. With regard to the public sector smart energy program, a variety of things are being done, including the issue that I alluded to before, which is e-mobility, and the technical work on the performance and the capacity of, for example, electric buses. And the ministry would have been integral in bringing 2 of them to the transport board, which are being monitored, and the performance of them are constantly being monitored, so that we ensure that we do not have unsatisfactory or inadequate performance levels, because in all that we do, we have to make sure that the public does not then complain that we have moved from one form of energy to another to their detriment. It must be to the advantage of the society as a whole. To perhaps explain better, and I want to just say one other thing. Much of that which is done in the public sector smart energy program is funded by the Inter-American Development Bank. And to explain the operations of that specific aspect of the ministry's business better, I would invite Permanent Secretary Andrew Gittins to take the lead, because he is the Permanent Secretary with responsibility for special projects in the ministry. So again, recognizing the significance of what this means to the country, there is now a third Permanent Secretary in the ministry charged with the responsibility of guiding the transformation exercise in this regard. So P.S. Gittins, if you would be so good, please.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, members of the House. My name is Andrew Gittins, and I'm Permanent Secretary of Special Assignments with responsibility for the implementation of the Barbados National Energy Policy. It's correctly stated by the Minister. The Energy Smart Fund is an IDB-funded project which to the tune of nearly $94 million, and it is going to be rolled over a 5-year period. And to a large extent, the funds here are to help us to realize the objectives outlined in the National Energy Policy to transition the country from fossil fuel to renewable energy. A lot of the funds here, therefore, are to help us to reach those targets in terms of the small business sector, as well as retrofitting a number of government buildings with renewable energy, and energy efficiency technologies. Specifically, I'm going to ask the project manager who has the more details to explain a little more detail, but just to say that, as the minister indicated, this financial year, we supported the transport board with two electric buses, and we are in discussions currently now with the transport board through these current estimates to help to buy 10 additional electric buses. And we're also discussing the possibilities of going as much as 20 over the next 2 financial years. But I would ask the project manager, Ms. Keisha Reed, to go into a little more details as to the expenditure to address the question raised by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Ms. Reed.
Good morning, House, honorable members. My name is Keisha Reed. I'm the project manager in the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship. So following up from the Permanent Secretary's comment, I will expand a bit with respect to the professional services required first for the 0455, which is the Sustainable Energy Investment Program, which we call for short Energy Smart Fund. So the program is basically at the initializing phase. We would have only signed the grant agreement with the European Union in February. So the program is co-funded by the IDB to the tune of $30 million, and we were able to successfully receive a grant from the European Union to the tune of 13.2 million euros. So in the first year, what we're seeking to do as it relates to the largest component of the project is to do the various pre-feasibility studies that are required. Now, this component seeks to retrofit over 100 government buildings. It builds on the work that would have previously done on the other program that I'll speak to next. So we need to get a better understanding in terms of the structural integrity of the buildings before we actually seek to put solar PV on the roofs. So we have consultancy services with respect to hiring a structural engineering firm to do that work. We also have to complete investment grade audits to get a better understanding in terms of the energy use for the various buildings, and to plan in terms of what are the actual retrofits we will be doing. Because in the past, what we recognize, some buildings are right for retrofitting in terms of the energy side of things. So you will retrofit the lighting, the air conditioning, but they're not the best for solar. And then and the flip side is also, we've also recognized that also occurs. So we need to have these pre-feasibility work to understand really what's happening in these buildings before we start and before we prepare the various tender documents to go to get a contractor to actually do the work. The minister would have also mentioned under this program, the first component also seeks to recapitalize this smart fund, which is managed by the Enterprise Growth Fund Limited. And with this new phase, what we're seeking to do is to improve the reach with respect to small and micro enterprises. So we are working along with Fund Access, which also falls under this ministry, to be able to reach those type of businesses, whereas EGFL has a more of a focus to small and medium type businesses. So we do have some consultancy services in here to support both entities with respect to getting the word out there and assisting those small and medium-sized businesses to actually come to the fund. The fund would not only allow businesses to do their retrofits, their renewable energy and energy efficiency retrofits, but we also will be offering this TOS grant resources to do pilot projects for small businesses. Because one of the things we recognize is sometimes it's not easy for businesses to enter into loans, and especially with COVID, this scenario will be exacerbated. And we'll be focusing not only on SMEs, but we'll be also focusing on the tourism sector, who has been severely impacted by COVID under this new phase of the program. So I'll just go quickly to 0455 to just summarize. This program is actually coming to an end. It ends in November this year. And as the PS would have mentioned earlier, we would have done a number of studies on various areas for the ministry. One that is the largest of the studies was actually the ocean energy studies. We would have looked in terms of the detailed, comprehensive review on offshore wind, fixed and floating. We looked at ocean thermal convergence, and we did a bit of a scoping on wave technology. And we didn't only look at the technical sides of things, but the consulting firm would have also looked at the regulatory framework that needs to be in place, the environmental concerns, and also the issue of financing these type of projects. And you'll hear more about that going forward. We also would have done a comprehensive needs assessment of the sector, looking at all of the government agencies involved in managing this new sustainable energy sector and understanding the needs going forward. So we also looked at the human resource capacity and what training is required. So in this financial year, we'll be doing more of that capacity building across government, and you'll also see resources, considerable resources for training, because we will be embarking on an expansive training program with respect to the various topics, and not just PV or wind, but the topics are very wide ranging in terms of building the various needs across the various ministries and departments. And the last one I will highlight is the public education and professional strengthening that would finish by mid this new financial year. And that body of work is actually looking at your primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions. The consulting firm would have done a gap analysis in terms of, with respect to the policy, where we need to be in terms of our educational system, because it's okay to do the retrofits within government, etc., but you need to build sustainability in the system. So the entire system needs to be based on the new policy, and all the children in the system, the school children, the persons working in the system, insurance companies, etc., need to understand where we're going. So this body of work will also continue in the new financial year. And currently we are doing some addressing immediate needs. So we've had some trainer programs have already been rolled out with teachers from SJPI and BCC, etc., who have been benefiting from this body of work.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, just to say thank you to the minister and his team for their responses. Information shared has been very helpful. Obviously, I'm just listening here. It's not easy to note or document everything that's being said. I wish I really could be in a position to benefit from a lot of what they have said in a more permanently recorded fashion, rather than simply listen and try to remember. But I thank them for their responses. Just I'm concerned that with a budget of $34 million, 20% plus of it is going to professional services consultancy fees.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning to the team from the ministry. I have a comment and a few questions, if I'm allowed to do the questions one after one, so as to give them a chance to respond. First, my comment relates to the fact that I would just like the minister to give my fisher folk the assurance. I'm sure they would feel more assured if it came from him than from me, that they too would be benefiting from the monies that are being made available for the persons who were displaced by COVID. And then my second comment relates to the idea that there is work happening in the maritime space, particularly as it looks at ocean exploration as a source of energy, to guarantee that those conversations should also be occurring with the Ministry of Maritime Affairs, who is also doing some work, research in that field as well. And also as it relates to the biomass as an energy source, of course, anything to do with sargassum being used as part of that biomass would also be a conversation I would like to have. But my questions relate to, one, the subprogram 0162, trust loans, and of course, just to give the public an update, but more specifically as it relates to the financial literacy. I've heard the minister speak on it several times. What does that mean for Barbados? What does that mean for small business people? How is that going to be part of the transformational agenda of the ministry? Then my second question relates to the electronic single window, which is subprogram 410. And the electronic single window for me is obviously very important, as the ministry is also doing its own single window. But what does that mean in terms of the ease of doing business? Why is that important to the ministry? Why are there funds of, I think, $500,000 allocated for that in these estimates and another $700,000 to grants? And then finally, the Leader of the Opposition spoke to it briefly, but in relation to smart energy, Madam Chair, there is a $8 million I see allocated for smart energy, whether it is smart energy 455 or 457, and 10 million allocated for the following year. And what is happening in the smart energy program, and how will that redound to the benefits of communities across Barbados who would have benefited previously under this program? Those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I want to thank the honourable member, first of all. His question on the, his request for me to intercede on his behalf with regard to the fisher folk has been noted, and I will do so now. Let me say, ma'am, that the initial effort at offering what I have tried to explain to the country is not a compensation package, but rather a more benevolent or compassionate type of assistance to persons, helping micro business people, especially at the household level, was not initially in its design to exclude fisher folk. What happened was that we began by recognizing that shops in Barbados had been closed during the period, had been open during the first period of pause, on the strongest possible advice from the public health officials. We recognize that what I have come to call communities of comfort did exist, where shops really were places that people would congregate, and because you had this feel-good factor and a comfort zone, and I will not once again go into the analogy of, what was the name of the lady I used? I can't even, Pearl. But we found that there were potential problems that would arise, and therefore it was felt it was better to close the shops. Clearly, people having been able to open at the beginning, but then being closed in the second shutdown period, felt that they would be disadvantaged, and rightly so. The Prime Minister sought to make an intervention, but we could not possibly calculate with certainty, and that's why I'm reluctant to use the term compensation. We could not calculate with certainty what the specific compensation would be for every shop in Barbados. And so therefore, an effort was made to find a middle ground of $750 per week for the 2-week period that the initial pause was expected to run. Thereafter, obviously, having sought to come to the assistance of one sector, it became clear that there were others that would be similarly disadvantaged, and the intention broadened in its scope and in its nature. The honourable member for St. Michael South and Minister of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy did make robust representation to me that his sector should be equally looked after. And after discussion with the minister responsible for finance in the Ministry of Finance, we came to an agreement between the three of us that we could do this, subject, of course, to the imprimatur of cabinet, and that was achieved. And so therefore, there is no issue whatsoever. Fish vendors and the persons who are fishermen, that community of people are entitled to apply and have been doing so. And I believe it would be remiss of me to say that payments have already been made. I can't say that with certainty because I do know that it was only last Tuesday that we came to this place in order to get the supplementary of $6.5 million, which allows us to have sufficient funds to begin the payment for that new category of persons and also to continue payments for taxis as well. So I could not say to what extent payments have been made at this stage, but certainly I do know that it is an entitlement. And I say through you, Madam Chair, to the listening community out there, that if you are a fisherman or you are a vendor in the fish market, then all you have to do, like any other vendor has done, is to establish that what you are claiming is authentic, that you do in fact have registered appropriately, and once that is provable, then you are entitled to the compensation at the same level as any other vendor has been entitled to, which is $250 a week for the period of the shutdown of that sector. So that from the very beginning up until the day that it reopens or had reopened, then there would be an entitlement, and that is easily calculated. The other issue that the Honourable Member raised was the question of financial literacy, and I thank him for it. There are two bugbears, I think, to small business development in Barbados that the country has to confront. And I say this with a certain degree of passion because I personally believe that this has plagued Barbadians. Certainly I've seen it in my constituency for many years. And I have been in the business of representing people now for, this is the 18th year. The creation of new sectors of potential participation and investment, Madam Chair, by ordinary Barbadians cannot be successful unless at its core there is a healthy, what's the word I'm looking for, promotion of financial know-how and financial well-being. I said it in my introductory comments. It bothers me personally that all too often in the Black Barbadian community especially, we have people who have set out to be entrepreneurs, and we all have grown up hearing this, people lazy, they only want to work in government because they ain't want nothing to do, and that kind of thing. There are people across all of this island who are very entrepreneurial. And where we have a challenge is in making sure that we continue to work with these folks in a way to ensure business continuity. I continue to say, I can't say often enough, if you look at the businesses that start and fail, that businesses that begin in one generation and do well, but then the son or daughter of the operator chooses not to bother with it.
Members of the House, I'm finding it very difficult to hear. You're louder than the speaker now. Thanks. Go ahead, Honourable Member.
Sorry. Businesses that start and fail, or businesses, ma'am, where one generation has operated the business well, but then his son or daughter chooses not to be interested in it, and it just drops by the wayside. The greatest percentage of that type of collapse of business is in the Black Barbadian community. Now, ma'am, I have to say candidly, what are the reasons for it? Again, the studies that I have been able to see suggest that there are a number of challenges. An appreciation of finance and some of the challenges associated with management often lie, according to what I read, at the center of the challenges that we are talking about. Ma'am, I used some analogies when I first spoke. writing a business plan. It may come as a surprise to you, ma'am, that some of the largest enterprises in Barbados have struggled because of difficulties with regard to business plans. They've struggled as a result of a difficulty in understanding what a marketing plan is. I don't want to tell tales out of school, but I think that most people would be quite surprised to discover that if you were to go and look for the marketing plan of that multi-billion-dollar airplane sitting down in a hangar at Grantley Adams right now, the Concorde, you would be hard-pressed to find it. And if it is challenging at that level, if we know, ma'am, that in the legal profession, there have been challenges in terms of managing the accounts of the operator of the law firm or the business. If we know, ma'am, that in the accounting profession, there have been challenges of a similar type, then why do we believe, ma'am, that it cannot happen across the board in Barbados? And so therefore, what I think has to be done is for this country to come face to face with the reality that it isn't just about saying, okay, I went to school and I got 4 levels or whatever, but it is about helping people to understand how to navigate the peaks and troughs of the commercial system, the landscape of the commercial system, which becomes more complicated day by day. And in some ways, ma'am, we all know this is true because we've experienced it. It is far more difficult for you to open a bank account today, ma'am, than it was when you were a little girl. And that is just a very simple example of it. So you have, I think, to recognize that what this is about helping people to understand the basics of what management is, understand the basis of what financial planning is, understand what share ownership is, understand what equity financing is, those things that are necessary skills for people at all levels to be able to draw on if they're going to be able to survive the challenges that they're confronting. I would want to go further, ma'am. I think that one of the beauties of the financial literacy program is that it speaks now not just to the adult population, but also to our children. COVID has been unkind to us. It was intended that when term opened in January, the Ministry of Education would be my partner, and that the Minister of Education would have had the opportunity of being the Minister of Education for the first time to have financial literacy classes going on as part of the curriculum activity that would have been taking place in both primary and secondary schools. And why? Because it is perhaps late in the day for us to be trying to get some of these basics instilled in the adult population. Not that it is impossible or that it is effort and time badly spent or badly invested. But ma'am, we all know that if we can start with our little children, and if we can say to your sons and daughters that not just this is the benefit of savings, but having saved, how do you invest wisely? Having saved, how then do you plan the way in which you could use that money to make more money? And if you look around, there are some youngsters. I saw a thing on CBC a couple of weeks ago with a 15-year-old at Queen's College who started his own business and doing remarkably well. But we have to have more of that because that is how the entrepreneurship is built. And I go further still, ma'am. Part and parcel of the literacy, financial literacy, is to understand that it isn't just about being trained. Right now, the trust loans, and I'm going to invite the CEO of the trust loans to speak on this matter, but it isn't just a question about being trained, but also about partnering with people after the training. And one of the weaknesses that we have in this country is that we don't recognize that even as a person who is a business person, a small entrepreneur, maybe 2 or 3 people working in the micro business with him, but you're very busy. You still got your family life. You're still running helter and skelter to make sure that you're making ends meet, to do everything, but you make a little bit of time to do the training. Having then done that training, you're plunged back into the business, but there still has to be a continuity, someone to work with you, to hold your hand. because you were taught that you have to get the accounting right. You have to know, and you said, well, you go to QuickBooks and this will help you get this thing done. But you know what? Who is working with you for a month? Which consultant is coming in to spend a month or two with you to make sure that you continue to do those things that you were taught in the correct way? Which consultant is coming in to make sure that your marketing is being done in the correct way? Where is the consultant who comes in to assist you with your human resource planning? And until we dedicate resources, in my view, towards small and micro enterprise in that way, so as to ensure that people who are doing a business can rely on the state as a partner, or the state's stakeholders, not necessarily the government when I say the state, but the stakeholders, that network of small business entities that help finance, that help offer technical assistance, etc., collectively must now be seen as a network that also offers us the intellectual wherewithal, the skill sets, and we can work through how best we collaborate to pay these people, but to come in and work with businesses. And I believe, ma'am, if you start at 50 businesses this year, and you can work with them and get them to have access to some consultancy on some of the legal issues they confront, consultancy on some of the managerial issues they confront, consultancies on some of the financial issues they confront, IT issues that they confront, ma'am. You help keep them going and put them on a platform where they can move from small to medium, and from medium, perhaps, ma'am, to export level scale. That is what we need, but that is what has never happened. There has not been that continuous developmental partnership. And frankly, ma'am, I think it is absolutely necessary. I don't want to go on. The honourable member asked a number of questions. I think he also spoke to the electronic single window. And clearly, that is an exercise which the ministry is undertaking as part of the need for us to ensure business facilitation, ensure the ease of doing business in Barbados, and to create an ecosystem where you're almost at any given point in that ecosystem, you are able to know, say for example, you are an importer of a product, you need to know where that thing that you're importing is, whether there are licenses from agriculture or from the public health officials that need to be obtained. You need to know what the process, what stop you're at, what stage you're at, what is required. If there are challenges, what those challenges are. You need to be able to have the position of customs and immigration, etc., virtually real time at your fingertips. With regard to the financing of it, PS Reed, perhaps you can assist me. Do we have Katrina's here?
Yeah, Katrina's here.
Yes. I will invite, therefore, ma'am, the chief economist in the ministry to speak to this matter of the electronic single window a little bit more, with your permission.
Good morning to the meeting. Katrina Bradshaw, Chief Economist acting in the Division of Small Business and Entrepreneurship. As Minister would have indicated, the Division of Energy is in the first quarter of this year, financial year, we're looking to roll out the electronic single window project. The electronic single window is, I will say, revolutionary. It has the capacity and the intention to improve the ease of doing business for trading. The electronic single window will allow parties involved in trade and transport to lodge standardized information and documents into a single port of entry to fulfill all import, export, and transitory related regulatory requirements. So, as I would say, the project will allow 28 government agencies who are involved in this process to be able to submit their information and the required documents into a single port of entry. The electronic single window would allow these entities, traders, and all involved to submit into a single standardized form. They submit the information using a standardized form. It will allow for the processing of this data and also allow for single decision-making for the clearance of these goods and single payment, which will all lead to improving the ease of doing business, which is one of the hallmarks and the push for our ministry during the next 24 months. The project has a duration of 24 months. And as I said, during the first quarter of this year, we will look to start the project. And by the end of the project, having significantly improving our ease of doing business. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, ma'am. No, ma'am, the honorable member had asked a number of questions. I'm not sure that we've captured all of them, but I was writing as fast as I could while he was going through.
He also asked about what's happening with the Smart Energy Program.
Oh, the Smart Energy Program, and perhaps I should go back to P.S. Gittins then to elaborate further on that.
If I recall the question, I think the minister was asking about the involvement at the community level. And the Smart Energy Program is really not geared at the individual level per se, but notwithstanding the investment fund, which provide for the on lending for renewable energy projects and EE projects, make provision for a large part of this fund to go towards those small and micro businesses. And for this reason, under the previous program, well, it was just the EGFL dispersing funds to small businesses. The government took the decision and we recognized that there were some micro businesses which were not necessarily being covered in that net. And then for that reason, fund access, which catered more for those much smaller businesses, is involved in the program as part of the partners. So while it is not going to be geared directly for individuals at the community level, it is still there for ensuring that those small and micro businesses can take part in this new sector, which we call the renewable energy sector. So therefore, it is not only focusing, or the fund is not only gearing for those large, big businesses, but it is geared at those small and micro businesses so that they can benefit from getting these small these loans, which are at concessionary rates, to bring them into the new sector and be able to benefit from the new the benefits that can be derived from the renewable energy sector. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Minister, and thanks to your team as well. But perhaps I am mistaken then. I was speaking now as Member of Parliament for St. Michael South, and many persons in this room would know that I'm always asking about lighting in St. Michael South. And I was of the view, perhaps wrongly so, that the lighting where we were changing out the older lights and replacing them with these smart lights, these brighter LED bulbs, I think they were, was under this program. Perhaps not. But if that's not the case, I'm still keen to know.
No. If I could interrupt the honourable member, ma'am, with the greatest reluctance, he is entirely correct. We misappreciated the thrust of his question, and it can be answered if he wants still to.
Of course, Minister. Thank you so much.
Therefore, Ms. Reid, please.
Right, so when I heard your question, you were specifically talking about the SMART fund, and that's 0455, and I know it can be a bit confusing, the Sustainable Energy Investment Program. So you are correct, under the Public Sector Smart Energy Program, which is 0457.
Sorry, I said 045 and 047. There were two sub-programs.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So yes, under the Public Sector Smart Energy Program, we would have started a year and a half ago to retrofit the various streetlights across Barbados. The target for the project was to retrofit 85% of the streetlights in Barbados, and I'm happy to report that we've actually exceeded that target. To date, we have retrofitted just over 24,600 streetlights as of the end of February. So in terms of the objective of the project, though, the objective of the project was focusing on energy efficiency and changing the HPS more, and that has higher energy consumption lights to the LED street lights. We weren't adding new lights. So We would have changed out streetlights across the highway and major car parks that are under the government electrical department. And we also would have partnered with the Barbados Light and Power to change the streetlights on major and minor roads. So as I indicated, we have changed out over 24,000 streetlights, and we're almost at the end of that particular project, because we would have only procured 27,650 streetlights in order to execute this work. And we anticipate before April that we should have all of the streetlights installed. GD is actually completed, and they're looking at new areas that they can light under their control, and Barbados Light and Power has indicated that they'll definitely be completed by April. In terms of your particular constituency, I'm just trying to understand if the question is that you need additional lighting. And if that is the case, that's a separate, process through the Barbados Light and Power Agency. But in terms of the project, we were just switching out light for light. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Pressure South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to all. Minister, I heard while I was on my way here, you mentioned that at the best of times, or in normal times, small business employs some 45,000 persons. I hope I heard you correctly. And that is an impressive number. And I expect that the other two categories of that create employment would be big business and the public service. Now, my question relates to all three categories in terms of government's thrust towards the creation of employment in the future. It is obvious that we're in the middle of an IMF program, so that the public service will not be a focus for the creation of employment going forward. I want to ask you, as a part of that collective voice that is responsible for government's policy, as between small business and big business, where will be that major thrust towards the creation of new employment in future? That's my question, my first question.
Ma'am, I thank the Honourable Member. He's thrown the net wide and has provoked some thought. I would want to say, ma'am, that it perhaps asks me to reflect on something that we have not spoken to in this debate as yet. But the question, ma'am, of credit has been on the forefront of my mind as the minister, and certainly as part of the policy developmental work of the Division of Commerce and of Small Business in the ministry. Now, if you're going to talk about generating employment, let us try to deconstruct and reconstruct how businesses operate. Small and micro businesses, according to the literature, and certainly if you talk to people around Barbados, it's not just a theoretical thing, it's a common understanding. What are their challenges? Well, as minister, what I've tried to do is not to just superimpose my view, but to get a feel for people who live this, who practice this in a day-by-day reality. And the Honourable Member who just spoke knows that he and I were small business persons together, albeit we practice as attorneys at law in the same chambers. But the fact of the matter is, ma'am, we are qualified, or in terms of the criteria that defines what a small business is, so too were we. And part of the challenge that you confront, ma'am, is, and I think perhaps one of the biggest challenges, is the question of credit. The Honourable Member is right. The study shows it's 46, not 45,000 people who in 2016 were micro, small, or medium business size employees, representing 92% of the enterprises in Barbados. So we're talking, first of all, about the vast majority of enterprises located within the sector. But their success, ma'am, according to the same study, is often blocked by virtue of limited access to credit. And if you think it through, Barbados's financial architecture is really rooted on collateral. If you're going to get some money by way of a loan, ma'am, you go through the same process essentially that you went through, or your forefathers or the plantation owners would have gone through in ancient times. It is really a medieval approach that we bring to this thing. More sophisticated thinking suggests that you can help small and micro businesses in particular, access funding if you were less reliant on land and less reliant on fixed assets. So that instead of having to mortgage your house in order to get a little piece of money in order to put into the business, and then the business has challenges, so then you have to refinance the mortgage on your house for a second or a third time in order to keep the business going. And then when COVID come along and you have to shut down, you lose your customers or whatever, you find that you're in danger of losing both house and business. You find, ma'am, that there has to be some way in which we must now open the corridors, the avenues of opportunity for people to be able to access credit in new ways. Across Latin America and in more progressive states in Africa, what they have done, ma'am, is to recognize that movable assets should and can be utilized to assist people in getting credit, which then allows them to plow that credit back into the business they have and generate productive activity and the employment that the Honourable Member is talking about. Every business involved in commodity production has some amount of machinery, ma'am. Every mechanic has equipment, ma'am. Every farmer has livestock, ma'am, and crops. Every business has accounts receivables. These are all things that are used, that are captured around the developing world that is thinking progressively as mechanisms within which or by which you can assist a business operator who is bereft of land. And Barbados is a land-scarce country, so immediately, you're saying to the lady who is skilled as a hairdresser and skilled as a cosmetologist, but lives in a housing unit in Redmond Village. She has no land. She's a tenant in the unit in Redmond Village. But the reality is, ma'am, she can't get a mortgage because she ain't got no land. But she is doing hair for people. A lot of business is turning over. So she has accounts receivables as part of her business activity. She has invested in some equipment as part of her business activity. The mechanic in the unit next door has equipment as part of his business activity. The person who is a farmer, ma'am, got livestock. The reality is, ma'am, what we must now do is to find a way of capturing new ways or new types of collateral. Now, the thinking of the ministry, ma'am, is that we must create a collateral registry in Barbados so that you register not just your immovable assets, which is what we've always done, the land, the house, etc., but you register the movable assets as well. And therefore, you can now, because they are registered and there's some certainty about them, you can now pledge against them in order to get your financial assistance from the commercial sector. It is a process, ma'am, which has had some significant discussion with the banking community. Honourable Member, the PS reading, you're advancing yours, I'm electing you to the Assembly. But PS and myself and some others on our team have had these types of meetings with the banking community. They are on board. There is a need, ma'am, for us to to do a thorough assessment, a study of the sector in Barbados. And that study has been commissioned by the ministry. Professor Velma Newton from the Impact Justice Project is working with us on that. And as recently as maybe a week or so ago, I would have received a notice from her indicating that the detailed report should be able to come to us by April of this year. Ma'am, I think it would answer the honorable member's question directly if I said that I think that is one way that we can go about generating the level of activity that we want. Because apart from government's capital works projects, which will give you a one-off type of employment because of the fact that you are working on a project, but that project has a start time and an end time. You want to have, ma'am, businesses in a mode where they can access funding in a difficult climate, and a climate which, if we are going to be frank with ourselves, compromises the operations of the business owner if that business owner is born into circumstances of poverty or continues to live in those circumstances of poverty. So that he is not a landowner yet in a land scarce country where the price of land is sky high is not his fault. But we have to find a way of empowering that person who has an entrepreneurial spirit and an entrepreneurial talent. Those youngsters who we see selling coconuts every Saturday and Sunday along the highway, ma'am, are entrepreneurs. Don't get it wrong. It isn't that they're lazy. And you got to dispel the myth about, I've said to you that there are people who will say, well, go and work in government. You got to dispel that myth too, because some of the people who work very hard, the hardest in Barbados perhaps, are those people in the public service. You can see the staff around me, ma'am. Their technical expertise shines through. But, ma'am, we have now to make sure that in the micro and small business sector in particular, we unleash the skill sets that exist for entrepreneurship. And I think, ma'am, that if you follow the reading, and I only know one way to do it, I got to read first to understand the thing. And the reading tells me, and then you walk around and talk to people about it, and that confirms to me that this is not just a gut feeling. They're saying, ma'am, that with 92% of the enterprises in Barbados, the main concern is that their success is often blocked by access to credit. And it is a duty, I think, that we have now to find creative ways of empowering this community of entrepreneurs so that they can then generate employment for themselves, first of all, and for others as well. I don't know if that answers the honourable member's question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And to follow up, I want to congratulate you and the ministry for the very compassionate attention that you're displaying towards vending. That's the term you use consistently. And while I congratulate you and the ministry, I know that you would not want to miss the opportunity to say that your attention is not only on vending, but that there are several thousands of young persons out there, not so young, who are interested in endeavors other than vending. There's manufacturing. We go into stores and we buy so many things that are made thousands of miles away without the instant realization that we would be equally willing to buy some of those same things if they're made in Barbados, believe it or not. There's farming. I had not listed farming, but thanks to you in your address just now, I did not think of farming. There's farming, which is a new and emerging area for young entrepreneurs. I know you'd want to seize the opportunity to tell Barbadians that the focus is on these persons as well, the creative industries. And when I say creative industries, I'm not only speaking of literature and music and so on. When I use the word creative, I'm talking about using the creative intellect even to manufacture material goods. And the forgotten child in business, sport. We have taken our sportsmen for granted. We are not aware, we live in a world in which we are not aware that our cricketers particularly are businessmen, and that they certainly attract a lot of people to this country who spend money. They certainly attract a lot of money to this country by their own performance. We neglect them, we ignore them, we treat them like minstrels, we pay them if they make us feel good, and if they don't make us feel good, we don't like to pay them. But I want to, and I know you agree with me, that our cricketers in particular, or footballers, are business persons. When a person takes up a sport professionally, he becomes a business person, and he is no less a business person than any other person, a manufacturer, a farmer, and endeavors such as that. So my broad question to you, I've congratulated you for focusing on vending, but I know that you want to seize the opportunity to say to Barbadians that your focus goes beyond vending and goes towards other young persons who are interested in entrepreneurship. Thank you very much, Minister.
I must thank you, Honourable Member, because it was only when you drew it to my attention that I recognized the extent to which I may have been emphasizing that. And I wouldn't want the takeaway to be that that is the be-all and end-all of the ministry's focus. Quite the contrary. Perhaps it is because of the fact that we put so much effort into it. But the reality is, ma'am, that the Honourable Member is 100% right. And I think that what we must now do that we have not done, and quite frankly, I smile to myself sometimes because the hand of God is an incredible thing. When I was Minister of Tourism up until July last year, in fact, it was in the context of the first national pause that I took to Cabinet a paper on linkages in the Barbados economy. And my colleagues in Cabinet approved in principle the fact that what we had to try to do was to build out linkages between the tourism sector, which at that time was still the lead player, preeminent, and other sectors which could grow with the tourism impetus being associated with them. So for example, the linkage between tourism and culture is abundantly clear. The linkage between tourism and agriculture and the agricultural sector feeding the tourism industry, abundantly clear. The linkage between tourism and sports has always been understood. Now, ma'am, I think that the Honourable Member is entirely correct when he says that we have to look at the creation of economic activity holistically. When I made my introductory comments, I said that it was perhaps more critical now than ever before since independence, and I genuinely believe that. The fact of the matter is that the energy sector creates a brand new opportunity for us to diversify the economy of Barbados and to create business opportunities which themselves can link to other existing sectors and can help strengthen those sectors as well. So, for example, ma'am, in fact, even before I go there, let me speak first to the business opportunities that can be created by the energy sector, because while we have talked about the cost of energy being reduced via photovoltaics, we've not spoken about the business opportunities of carrying along a class of Barbadians who have previously been left out. And that is an important thing that we have to talk about. Now, the National Oil Company, for example, because it is an oil company, has a greater degree of flexibility financially than many will. It is positioned strategically in this sector, ma'am, because of the fact that one of the things it must now do is to make itself relevant, not just to oil and gas, but relevant to photovoltaics and the new emerging technologies. So it must see itself more in the context of an energy company. Now, ma'am, if we look across Barbados at the opportunities on the rooftops of houses, and we just heard Ms. Reid talk about the need for us to make sure there's structural integrity in government buildings before you put a photovoltaic panel on its roof. The same thing is true in households. But the fact of the matter is, ma'am, that we know that there are several households in working class communities which have that structural integrity. What perhaps the household does not have is the financial wherewithal to make the investment in the photovoltaic panel. But if that panel can be made available, ma'am, by way of an intervention so that we structure the payment for the panel over a long-term period, let us say, ma'am, 10, 15 years, it could come down perhaps to as low as $40 a month, which makes it eminently affordable for most people who will then become independent in terms of energy from the fossil fuel, independent in terms of energy from the fluctuation in prices, which is humbugging all of us in Barbados today, independent, ma'am, in terms of being able now as a business proposition to put themselves together with the correct amount of training and recognition of accreditation of their skill sets in order, ma'am, to be able to do the photovoltaic implementation on the roofs of NHC units, on the roofs of the homes in village communities all around Barbados. And I think, ma'am, that is the type of business opportunity that allows for people who are right now dislocated as a result of the stumble of the tourism sector to find themselves independent footing in order to do things via the energy sector. Now, ma'am, the energy sector can be linked back to agriculture because obviously there is substantial agricultural acreage where if you erect the photovoltaics at the right height and with the right spacing to allow for servicing and maintenance, as you must do, you can have a co-investment, a coexistence of the farmer's interests taking place at the same time or in the same space as the photovoltaic interests. And again, this is a possibility that has to be followed through, in my judgment, in this economy. It also is true to say, ma'am, that the challenge Barbados has had, look, we don't have any less, taking oil out of the picture. Let's take oil out of the picture, oil and gas. We were no different in terms of our structure to Trinidad and Tobago. We imported most of our raw materials as they did. What they had that we did not have that allowed them to build out a manufacturing sector was access to eminently affordable oil and gas. Now, ma'am, when you introduce photovoltaics and renewable energy into the mix, it creates an opportunity for us to be, again, speaking the language of having manufacturing activity done, but at a cost that is competitive because of the fact, ma'am, that in the same way that others have to import their raw material, we import in our raw material too, but we can translate, we can do the value-added work, we can build or do whatever else we need to do, ma'am, at affordable energy levels. The input of the energy is no longer a factor that knocks it dead from the very beginning and makes it a frustrated effort. And that is one of the things that have humbugged the manufacturing sector in Barbados. And again, ma'am, I must tell you, it is true that the linkage with the sports sector that the Honourable Member is speaking about is entirely correct. One of the things that this country, in my view, has to do is to take sportsmen and sportswomen very seriously and stop making sport at sports. We have an opportunity, ma'am, and we began it, and it should continue when tourism once again picks back up. We introduced a thing called beach wrestling in Barbados. We have brought to this country people from the international community who come here to do coastal rowing. The fact of the matter is that Brazil is a major source of tourism investment and tourism activity. But you know, ma'am, one of the things that sell Brazil, apart from the carnival experience, and the ladies here are no less beautiful. One of the things that sell tourism, ma'am, is the fact that once you have had a sporting activity, it is very often every sporting activity you find to do on land, you do on the beach. The football is on the beach. The netball is on the beach. The volleyball is on the beach. And after it is all said and done, you break down into a massive beach party. And you party late into the night. And the bonfires and so on. And you're drinking your drinks and the music is playing. And everything, ma'am, about the beach experience, everything that could be milked from the beach experience is done by the Brazil community. It is a fact. Now, in Barbados, we have equally beautiful beaches. We have equal interest in sport and activity, but we are not utilizing that beach space. And if the honourable member, as I know, feels very strongly about this, because I saw that which he did in St. Lawrence Gap with regard to road tennis, which is not necessarily on the beach, but it is right next to the beach. But the fact of the matter is, ma'am, that is what we need to draw on. We need to draw on a greater use of the natural resource and to link it with the activity that has made people move to play sports, ma'am, competitively on beaches is big business around the world. I think very often Barbadians don't recognize this. I met in Canada a man who told me, Minister, he was involved in the coastal rowing, and he travels 90 miles every weekend from where he lives to get to a beach to do it. In Barbados, most places, you can get to the beach in 9 minutes. And hosting these types of events at all levels is a boom for the Barbados economy. So I think the honourable member is entirely correct. It is not a developmental scheme that just looks narrowly at vending and enhancement of facilities and so on at that level. But it is really, ma'am, a need for us to rethink and re-strategize on the way in which small and micro business can develop via linkages and via use of natural resources, whether those resources be the geophysical ones, like the beach and so on, or whether they be in the form of the renewable energy, which just captures the geophysical in many regards. I think, ma'am, that it is an important thing for us to recognize that given the pressure on central government, entrepreneurship is really the way of the future. All of us came out of a community where the culture and the thinking was proceed with caution when you're going to work for yourself. As a little boy, my mommy told me, when I told her I wanted to be a lawyer, she said, but why do you not try to get a job in government first? And I, being rebellious as I always was, said, no, mommy, I can do this by myself. But I am sure all of us know that we had a mommy or a granny who would have said, well, start out by working with government first, and you find your feet, you catch yourself, you get a little job security and so on before you break into the wild blue yonder. A different thinking dominates the world nowadays, and we have to compete with that world. In closing, ma'am, I say simply this as well. In addition to all those other things that I talked about, is a need for us to work with the small, micro, medium enterprises at every level and in every sector on the standards of doing that which they do. And I alluded to this at the very beginning. This creation of standards and setting of those standards is absolutely important. And ma'am, it may come as a surprise to you to discover that this country has turned such a blind eye to standards maintenance and standards creation that our National Standards Institute, which was the precursor and the example that was set for the Eastern Caribbean, all of them came here bar none and borrowed from us that which we created as the National Standards Institute model. Right now, the National Standards Institute has 44 clients in the totality of the business landscape of Barbados. And that, ma'am, tells the whole tale. It tells you that we as a country have not taken the attainment and maintenance of standards, which are basically set to do two things. One, make you competitive, and two, put you in a position to export into somebody else's place and beat the trade barriers, the non-tariff trade barriers that are established to keep you out. And if we're not doing that, then, ma'am, we're not being serious about it. So we have to have a serious look at national standards development. There has to be a standards infrastructure in Barbados that we take seriously, and a standards policy, I give you the assurance, ma'am, will be rolled out by the ministry, and it is in fact put into the budget for these estimates as part of the way forward in the immediate future.
Thank you very much, Minister. And you've led right into my final question on the issue of energy. And as you know, I'm capable only of asking very simple questions, and you must bear with me. When the electricity bill comes, people get very nervous. In fact, some people keep it there for 2 days before they open it. They're afraid to open it sometimes. And that goes for householders as well as business people, and particularly small business people. Now, Barbadians are quite aware, and we're educated to the point where we're hearing that the new energies are not only clean, but that they're cheaper. Minister, are you able to say on this date to Barbadians that in future, with the introduction of these new and alternative energies, that our electricity bills will be lower? That's a very simple question, and I think Barbadians anticipate a very simple answer.
The simple answer, honourable members, that is the intention.
Thank you very much.
And I will have, obviously, to elaborate a little bit. One of the reasons why we have paid exceptionally close detail to the attention and detail to the negotiation with the Barbados Light and Power in an effort to create the licenses which will allow for there to be a new competitive arena for generation of electricity in Barbados. And you will recall, I made the point, the Light and Power will continue with its license to transmit electricity, and they will continue to dispatch electricity into the grid. That is a very technical thing. But generation of electricity and storage of electricity will be areas where there will be competition, and it will be independent power producers, and everybody in the country is entitled to participate in this space. But there has to be, there are a number of things that can lead to an unevenness in this system if we are not careful. Someone earlier mentioned, I think it may have been the leader of the opposition, mentioned the particularly close attention that not only foreign investors start to take when they see an opportunity of this nature arising in a small economy, and equally so, there are some people in Barbados who, because of consolidation of wealth and opportunities to consolidate their wealth born over several decades, are in a position where they're sitting on substantial resources and are looking for a way to find financial heaven. And we have, even though this country is a democracy, to be mindful of all of these things and make sure that we do not commit the atrocity yet again of having a new sector evolve, but it fall into the hands and under the control of the same people who have enjoyed control of the Barbados economy from the time there was a Barbados economy. And I think you understand very clearly what I'm saying. If you look at the agricultural sector, you will see that there are some people who from time immemorial, as far back as the memory of man doth run, had control over that sector. And then when tourism evolved, they moved swiftly into that and had control over that. And it would go on and on if there is not appropriate intervention by government to safeguard and protect the interests and advance and promote the interests of the wide cross-section of the Barbadian public. So that's philosophically where this minister stands. Now, the honourable member, therefore, would understand that the challenges that we face with regard to renewables are several, but we have to make sure that we proceed in such a way as to do the balancing act, that we maintain a satisfactory opportunity for investors at all levels, and equally that we maintain the well-being of the consumer. And I would have to say to you that a major part of the discussions we've had is to protect the rights of the consumer in this exercise towards moving to renewables. It is a challenging structure for the simple reason that there is in this ministry established a fair trade commission. and they have their own role to play. But as you know, honorable member, they are a quasi-judicial body, so they don't get involved in negotiating. But quite frankly, we have to follow the directives that they have issued. We have to understand what the thinking is of the Fair Trade Commission as we try to strategize on what a new sector is going to look at, so that at no stage do you lose sight of what is in the best interest of the consumer. So yes, it is at the forefront of my thinking. I think you also spoke to a very specific matter, which is the raising of the electricity bills in recent times. I think we all know that even at the price of petrol at the pump, government's financial architecture by way of taxation leads to certain things having to happen. And perhaps I could ask Mr. Brian Haynes, who is our chief economist and chief project analyst in the Division of Energy, to elaborate a little bit on the price increases that you have seen in recent times.
Good afternoon, honorable members of this honorable chamber. And my name is Brian Haynes. I am the Chief Project Analyst in the Research and Planning Unit in the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship. Prices in Barbados are challenging things, and most of us who have studied these things know that we have this tendency to be sticky downwards, and prices go up quickly, but they take a long time to go downwards. Within the electricity sector, the main issue here has been oil and the variation in oil prices. And that volatility has often resulted in the price of electricity going upwards. As you know, we're moving through the fuel clause adjustment. That takes a significant portion of the cost of electricity. Interestingly enough, this year we've seen that drop to as low as 22 cents per kilowatt hour. The challenge, therefore, with renewables, once we can get the balance, as the minister mentioned correctly, is that we have to make sure that the use of a domestic resource in the form of the sun and the wind and the bioenergy and the wave and the offshore wind energy and so on, that comes to market at a price that is beneficial to the entire economy. It has to be beneficial to those that are the consumers and those who are the investor. But that balance has to be struck so that at no point in time there is obscenity in profitability, and whereas that the benefit of the investment redound to all involved, including the investor. So there is an opportunity for us here to bring prices down if we approach the renewable energy sector in a way that creates an environment where we can bring remove the fluctuations in oil prices that produce energy, and we have the potential to, I dare say, bring it as far down as 40%, but it means that we have to be very strong in our regulation. We have to be very strong in our market monitoring and to ensure that we get prices that are at a level that is worthwhile to all involved. I hope that so that my explanation is helpful to the minister.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Blessings on you, Minister. My question is also a simple one. I want to use some of your words. You mentioned business plan, you mentioned marketing plan, you mentioned navigating the Barbados, the business landscape in Barbados, and you mentioned empowering entrepreneurs. My question is one on the behalf of the constituents of St. John. I want to source information about all of those things that I mentioned above. And my question is, is there literature that I can pick up to share with those constituents? And is it possible for, if not you, a member of the ministry to share space online, whether it be Facebook or Zoom, to provide information for those in the constituency of St. John who are interested in pursuing entrepreneurship, who are looking to be self-employed? Because I realize that there's a groundswell of individuals within the constituency who are looking at self-employment as a viable option. So I just want to know if there's literature that I can pick up on their behalf, and if there's someone, an officer from within the ministry, that would be prepared to share social media space to provide that information in relation to all of these areas. Thank you.
The honourable members asked a very important question. I have 7 months, as you know, honourable member, with my feet under this desk. One of the concerns that I have is the issue that you've just raised. Because with the best wishes in the world, there has to be a more effective way of reaching people, reaching the clientele, the stakeholders that we want to reach. So the short answer to your question is, it is a matter that is being worked on. Equally, I am happy to say that some of the partner agencies, for example, Fund Access and Trust Fund Limited, are already online, and their presence is a lot more powerfully felt than the ministry. But that is a situation that I am hoping that we will be able to correct in very short time. I understand the concern that you have. As a member of parliament, I have the same concern. I think we all have to face the reality that it is now a question of us being able to, not only in this ministry but across government, being able to tell our story in a better way and to share with people the opportunities that we are trying to create for them in a more effective way.
Honourable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. Certainly, my good friend, the Minister, is not a victim of the old dictum that the entrepreneur is born. It's very suggestive in most of his pronouncements that he's looking forward to an economic transformation, and that workers possess the capability and the ability as well to become managers of their own companies. We have inherited a tradition of a group of people dominating most of the businesses all across Barbados with no special endowments. And we have educated a population, not just in academics, but in various skills. And most of the times, right now, from the beginning to the completion of jobs, as long as the blueprint is available, the people who produce the work and do it with the greatest levels of admiration and efficiency are people who don't own anything. So I am assuming that we are going to be seeing a new trend in workers' participation in terms of ownership and in terms of managing some of these enterprises. Now, I don't know if there's a collective understanding of why this form of transformation is important, but I would just like to invite myself and the department to which I'm now responsible for, at least to be part of some dialogue with the Small Business Association in seeing how we can work together, so that I would not see any great emphasis or exclusively placed on standards, accommodation, elements of efficiency, that at least I would see, as we look to the future, transformative approach into how do we address these imbalances within the economy itself and the ownership of businesses. And I just want to invite myself into these circumstances and offer the department at least to share in some discussion with the small business units and so on within the ministry.
I thank the honourable member for his observation. Honourable member, I cannot speak to collective understanding outside of the ministry and its stakeholders. I believe that I have spoken to stakeholders at all levels and of all shades and complexions, and I have tried to emphasize a philosophical position that I bring as minister that underscores three fundamentals that I think the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector has to be able to confront if we are to go forward, as we must. I am not prepared to compromise on the issue of dignity in the workplace. I heard the honourable member for Christchurch South caution me that perhaps at my peril, the naysayers out there will say, well, the minister spent a lot of time talking about the vendors, blah, blah, blah. But the minister will spend a lot of time talking about the vendors because there must be dignity in the workplace. And for too long, we have had a set of circumstances which have been less than dignified for people to work in, and have been poisoned by a tendency in this country to criminalize that very vulnerable and marginalized sector of people. I equally bring a philosophical perspective that speaks to equality of opportunity. I think that the linkage by the Prime Minister in shaping this ministry and its departments with energy and small, micro, medium enterprises creates an opportunity for us to unleash economic activity in a new sector. And it will be a crying shame if we as a government do not try to make sure that the entity which is charged with responsibility for energy delivery in Barbados, the governmental entity that is, that entity must also be a player in the market, I feel. And that entity must also be have an opportunity to by its intervention, regulate, by its intervention, economically correct by competition, that which would ordinarily be the course of increasing energy costs as a result of RE, which is what was questioned by the honourable member for Christchurch South. And let me be a little bit more specific so people understand clearly. If the government's energy business, energy company, doesn't look out for the small man in this sector, then what will happen is that you will move to RE, and people with a lot of money will get into RE before anybody else could. And they, because there's no other option now, they will corner that market. There's no more fossil fuel, but I got big money. So let me plug in as many megawatts of opportunity as I can, and who is going to pay for it while I go to the bank laughing? So I philosophically believe that there has to be equality of opportunity, and equally, as I said to you at some length just now, access to capital. And I believe that this business of creating a registry for movable assets, a collateral registry, where for the first time Barbadians who have equipment and crops and all the other things I drew to the attention of this house, livestock, etc., that has value. We recognize its value, and we give people an opportunity to take out a small loan against its value, so that that small loan, that entrepreneur with the small loan, can enhance his or her financial circumstances. Don't have to beg you, honorable member, or me to get them a job anywhere because they're standing on their own 2 feet, and then shortly they're employing 2 or 3 people, and then they come back and say, look, this isn't a micro business no more, this is now a small business, and treat to that small business in a different way. Because the other thing that we're going to correct, and must correct quickly, is this misguided perception that one cap fits all size heads. And so the same policy for micro business is the policy for small business, is the same policy for medium-sized business. That is nonsense, and that cannot work. And so therefore, again, honorable member, long story cut short, your intervention is welcomed, your assistance is welcomed. I understand where the thrust of your assistance offer comes from, and I think it would be a most useful thing for the office that you now hold in the office of the Prime Minister to be working with us in the redevelopment of this very critical sector.
Last question, honorable member.
Yeah, and probably this is more comment. There seems to be a view that when a small business person is involved in business, the dynamics of the business which he has, that he is supposed to remain an efficient small businessman till eternity. So you have vendors who selling on the street, but sometimes you don't get the impression from discussions that people can see them owning a mini mart and eventually owning a mega mart or so. So a vendor is a vendor, and in many cases, lots of vendors from the beginning to the end, they remain vendors. I believe that we sometimes have to engage business people in dialogue and let them know exactly where we would like to take them. I believe that sometimes you have 6 and 7 men doing the same thing, and you can see the economies of scale that can easily derive from from people forming cooperatives and consortiums and being able to exploit these different economies of scale by coming together and doing basic things, even in the retail section, of collectively purchasing items at lower unit costs. Sometimes those persons don't have the opportunity or sometimes don't fully understand where the opportunities exist in the coming together in a configuration of this type, and they just continue to conduct the business on and on and on in the same way that they probably traditionally inherited it from the grandmother or somebody. But I think that we need to have special training programs. You invite them. It is not mandatory. You're inviting them, asking them to participate, because we want to work along with them, not only making small finance available to them, but also helping them, monitoring them, not because we want to know their business, but monitoring them and ensuring that they're making the required steps that they can arrive at specific objectives within a given period of time. I just feel that the state sometimes has to play a role of that kind because of the evolution of the history from which we have come. And at least if we're trying to build a new society and a new economy, we're going about in this transformative path, I think that there are certain additional responsibilities that we have to take on in order to help to pull people up by their bootstraps.
I agree with you, honorable member. Again, my ministry on the commerce and small business and entrepreneurship side has responsibility for cooperatives, as you've quite rightly referred us to. And I quite frankly think that that is part of the way forward. we have equally as a government, in my judgment, to continue to not only work with people to build cooperatives. In fact, there's another happy coincidence because the energy cooperative was created a few months ago, and equally there is a cooperative that is on the top of my mind, the artisans and contractors, that was created just shortly after I became minister. And as I look at both of those, they speak exactly and entirely to what you are talking about. May I also say that as a government, we also have to make sure we create the opportunities as well. You would no doubt have heard, Honourable Member, the naysayers who sometimes may mean well but are not thinking developmentally, saying that, for example, with artisans and contractors, but these people don't have any experience on doing large projects, so how could they be put into the mix on a larger type government project? Or they don't have any capital to finance the startup, the mobilization. Well, the reality is that you will never have the experience if you're never given the opportunity. You will never have the capital to mobilize startups because you've never been given the opportunity. And government, given the same historical record that you've alluded to just now, government must be mindful, in my judgment, of that, and government must be the intervener that right-sizes this ship. Otherwise, it will list hopelessly in the direction of too few to the detriment of too many. And therefore...
sorry, if you could segue into your wrap-up, we are more...
Okay. And therefore, Honourable Member, I think that it is entirely correct for us to go down the developmental route that you're suggesting. Now, if I understand the chairman of committees correctly, you are now inviting me, ma'am, to make closing remarks.
Indeed, I am.
Seems to have come to an end too quickly. Anyhow, ma'am, I am guided by you as I always will be. I want to thank all honourable members for their questions. I want to thank all the members of my team assembled here for participating and for sharing of their expertise. I want to give the country through you, ma'am, the assurance that this ministry is aimed only at the improvement of the economic and financial circumstances of the country, building a spirit of entrepreneurship and a culture of entrepreneurship in Barbados, and ensuring that we see a return to significant economic activity as effectively and as quickly as is possible. Obviously, ma'am, the energy sector has to play a major role in this. And in this regard, I want to say that there are a number of innovations that we are intending to bring with respect to those people who have been queuing up to get licenses for renewable energy. PS will forgive me for saying that she and I and the chairman of the Electric Light and Power Advisory Board would have had a lengthy meeting on this matter in recent times, and there are some adjustments that we will make. We will deconstruct and reconstruct that licensing application process so as to make it more nimble and more responsive to the interests of investors of all types in Barbados. All types, I emphasize. Equally, ma'am, on the commerce side, it is very clear, as I explained already to the leader of the opposition, that there are some sectors which are in urgent need of attention, and there are a number of bills that will be coming before the House very shortly, already in draft, and I think on the order paper. If it has not been laid, it will be laid very shortly. Is the matter of facilitating businesses via liquor licensing. Again, already in draft, ma'am, is the matter I've referred to ad nauseum about empowerment of vendors. Ma'am, already in draft is the micro small business development policy framework. And equally, ma'am, we're going to have to do some revisions to the Electric Light and Power Act, which will make sure that the new technologies are written into the legislation and therefore given the weight of law and facilitating people with the opportunity to do the type of investment that they need to do properly. So, ma'am, there are a number of things that this ministry will be doing in order to bring a sense of um, accelerated economic activity in the country, and not least of them will be what I am hoping to present during the course of these estimates, certainly before the close of the estimates, and a statement to the public with regard to the matter of an accelerated regime for investment in photovoltaic and wind-related energy. So, ma'am, I'm grateful to you for the opportunity to have been able to speak to your house at length, and I'm much obliged.
Honourable member, could you move the head, please, Minister?
Beg pardon, ma'am. I beg to move that head 92 stand part.
Question is that head 92 in the amount of 36,836 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, at this point, I propose that we will take our break for lunch, and I therefore ask that the proceedings be suspended until 3:15 this afternoon. Postponed until 3. Oh, okay. Beg to move that you report progress to His Honor the Speaker, and ask for leave to sit again.
Okay. Question is that I do not report His Honor the Speaker. I ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman of Committees has reported progress and asks for leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
You just left it on. Beg to move that we suspend today's sitting until 3:15 for lunch.
The question is that this Honourable Chairman be suspended until 3:15 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands suspended until 3:15 p.m.